Good morning, Wichita, and good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us for this morning's City Council meeting, Tuesday, April 22nd. I call this meeting to order. With us this morning is Father Lease with Catholic Diocese of Wichita, who will provide our invocation. Following the invocation, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. We ask that you please stand for both.
Mayor Wu and honorable council members, thank you for the invitation to lead today's prayer. In our Catholic tradition, for the next 8 days, we celebrate Easter, the octave of Easter. So we worked hard in Lent leading up to it with 40 days of preparation, kind of our March Madness leading up to Easter. And of course, the championship team wants to celebrate as long as they can after the victory. So we are celebrating in our tradition. So the second Tuesday of Easter week, we call to mind still the grace of the resurrection of our Lord Jesus. And certainly on behalf of the Catholic community would ask your prayers. As you know now, we are mourning the loss of Pope Francis at the venerable age of 88 years old. He will be laid to rest at a funeral mass this Saturday at 10 a.m. in Rome. So the entire Catholic community throughout the world prays for the Holy Spirit's guidance in this time of transition. And so we appreciate your prayers in the local community for supporting us. And on behalf of our Bishop, Carl Kimmy, we thank you for those prayers. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Father in heaven, we thank you for the gift of the life of your Son, Jesus Christ, who came into our world as a man, who led us to you, our Father in heaven. And by the suffering that he endured, by the death on his cross and the resurrection into eternal life, has opened a way for us from this life to our heavenly home. But Lord, today we pray for this home of ours in Wichita. We pray for our city. We pray for all of our citizens. We pray for those most in need. Send your Holy Spirit upon these council members gathered together today for the good of our city. Bless those who will bring business on the agenda today. Fill this space with your peace, with your concord, that we may be a Wichita community truly united for the good of one another and experiencing your Easter blessings. Father, with your Son and the Holy Spirit, you live and reign as God forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Father Lease. Mr. Clerk, please call the first item.
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting, April 15th, 2025.
Are there any corrections? I see none. I move to approve the minutes for April 15th, 2025.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Public agenda. The public agenda allows for up to 5 speakers to have 5 minutes each to address the council. No action will be taken relative to items on the public agenda other than referral to the city manager for information as necessary. Speakers will please state their name and address for the record. A time clock will display the speaker's remaining time to speak. Order and rules of decorum will be observed.
Are there any individuals who would like to address the council? Please state your name and the district you reside.
George Theo Harris, District 3, but I'm trying to get out of this city, but anyhow, I need this city council, at least 4 of you, well, first off, welcome, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Legal. I need 4 of you just to ask Mr. Layton, before he leaves, because he'll take that knowledge with him. I've asked previous boards here, why was the Animal Advisory Board started 10 years ago in 2015. And they all have amnesia. So we need to know. Could you please ask him why it was started? Because if we don't know why it was started, we don't know where to go from here, or from there, actually. So can we do it now? Or I know you guys don't like to answer. You answer everyone else except for George, but that's okay. Can we ask 4 of you to ask him? Because he's here right now. No? Don't address George. Everyone else you address. Okay. So a year ago, I turned in a tree across the sidewalk over on Pawnee, west of George Washington Boulevard. And although she doesn't like to be called a neighborhood assistant, she's the assistant to my city councilor. I got it. A year later, went by there today, tree still on the sidewalk, dangerous, there's a pipe that's sticking out there. For the life of me, I can't figure that out. I called in a tree branch that had fallen from a person's tree, but it's just into their property. I've brought 2 discount tree service people to trim the tree or cut it down because it's a dead tree. I sent something to our forestry department. He said, you got to go through MABCD. MABCD won't talk with me. So only in Wichita again. So the director of MABCD, I was calling in a property, and the property has all kinds of discrepancies. So I listed them, and so he sends back to me, and I will quote, I am a bit confused about the content of your email. And all I always tell them is about a property that's got all kinds of problems, and they haven't done anything about it, MABCD. However, if part of the intent is for your neighborhood association to offer assistance to the owner or tenant of this property, I would encourage you to do so. And I hope they would accept and appreciate that. So what do? They park on the grass. Well, there's no grass anymore. It's all dirt. They want me to go plant grass seed? I don't know what he wants me to do to help them. They have illegally parked cars stored on the property. Does he want me to buy them? Does he want me to insure them? What would he want me to do with their illegal cars? And then there's miscellaneous crap everywhere. How do we help them? I'm a disabled veteran, and he's asking me to help him. I said, how about we have no help for them? They need MABCD to do their job that they're paid for in whatever funding sources they receive those monies from. So with that being said, I'm just blown away by everything. So thank you. And I've been trying to get a hold of, since Mr. Layton won't talk to me, and that's fine, I tried to get a hold of Dante, who's an attorney with the city manager. He won't call me. So what are we doing, people? What are we doing? Thank you.
Thank you, George. And to answer your question, the Animal Services Advisory Board reviews existing animal control regulations and makes recommendations for changes, seeks constructive solutions to the concerns of community members regarding animal control regulations, and assists in providing education to the community. One of the purposes of this board is to enhance the ability of animal control officers to communicate with the community and determine operating policies which further its mission of both public safety and the humane care of animals. It is the goal of this board to have at least one member to be a licensed veterinarian and one member from a certified local rescue group. At this moment, there are 2 vacancies, and Councilmember Ballard and I are both looking for 2 individuals to join this animal advisory board. The individual I need requires the certification of being a veterinarian, whereas Councilmember Ballard can be anyone in the community. So again, we are looking for individuals to be on the board, and you can find that information at wichita.gov and click on government, and then boards. Those are the answers to your question.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. If I had 55 seconds left, and I'm glad you brought up that point, because I didn't have a written. So right now, I've been asking I'm on the Animal Advisory Board. I've been asking for them to move the venue so we could start later. I was on the bicycle board for 7 years. We met at 5:30. So boards can meet later when people can be off work, and there's a lot of people that have animals and stuff and concerns. So I asked them for a couple years now, hey, let's move it, let's move it, let's move it. So, because they were kicking us out at 6 o'clock at the Humane Society. Wouldn't do it for George. But lo and behold, someone in their bright wisdom took someone from the Humane Society that had resigned from there, that can't supposedly go back into the Humane Society. So now, because they can't go in there, they've moved it. So now we're gonna meet at the library, so Animal Services and Humane Society is supposed to work together. And we hired someone that can't go in the Humane Society. Who's making the decisions around here, people? Please.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Reggie, could you come up and chat just real quick about the program we have on concentrating to try and catch up on the tree removal?
Yeah, so at the end of last year, we had some cost savings that was from the fuel surtaxes that we didn't pay out for the previous year, so we were able to extend the contract to have a vendor that comes out and look at certain radius in different communities to do tree and stump removals. So we actually look at different communities to see the highest concentration, and then start in a 7-mile radius from there to start doing those removals. As far as, I know that George and I talked briefly before the meeting, and for the tree removals that he was referring to, when he reports it to our team, we go out and inspect it and see if it's a hazard, see what condition it's in, and whether it's on city property or not. And if it's not on city property, that's why he's referred to MACB for them to address it.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think it's a third, we're going to catch up on the third of the orders with this tree removal program with the savings?
That's correct.
Okay, so that should help in the future, try and get to some of these a little quicker. All right, thank you, Reggie, appreciate it.
Reggie, can I ask a couple more questions regarding that? We have been getting questions regarding dead trees and wanted to know, can you talk about the process of just reporting it in the first place and how that finally comes to a City of Wichita worker?
Sure. So we have a couple of different options. We have See, Click, or Fix, where we can actually go in and report it there, and it comes to the appropriate person on our team, or they can call in directly to the Parks Department. And once we receive those, we go out and do an inspection of it to determine where they are, and then they're prioritized based on the condition of the tree when they're actually removed. And then we assign it to our team to actually address it from there.
Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Reggie, has the fuel surplus money that is being used to catch up on some of the backlog, is that work already done?
A lot of the work is done. One of the challenges we ran into, the company that we were working with initially had a death in the ownership, so that delayed us getting some of those projects completed. But we do still have option to use some of that to move forward with some other removals as well.
And it did cut our backlog by around 1/3?
That is correct.
So we did have 2,500 and we've cut that by 1/3.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else from the public like to address the council? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated April 21st, 2025.
I think we missed consent agenda.
Sorry, I was a little thrown off by that.
Consent agenda items 1 through 20.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any items to be pulled? Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to pull 3B and 5A.
I'd like to pull item number 10. I see no further items to be pulled. I move to approve all items except for 3B, 5A, and 10.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Or, okay. Motion passes 7-0. We'll start with 3B.
Thank you, Mayor. We've talked a lot about parking and a lot about this specific corner, so if anyone could just bring us up to speed on this corner lot. Sorry, Troy.
It's okay. Troy Anderson, Assistant City Manager. I also have with me our parking manager, Stephanie Knable. This is a sort of an ongoing lease agreement with GSA. They continually lease spaces in this parking lot from the city. We recently responded to an RFP in regards to that governmental request to allow them to lease parking from the city within that parking lot.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I see none.
Mayor, if I could, just a note, because there has been talk about reuse of this property, the contract with the GSA does have an exit ramp. And so with 180-day notice, we can terminate the agreement at any time.
Thank you, City Manager. I see no further questions. We'll now open it up for public comment regarding this item. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Ballard.
Sure. Oops, sorry. I move to approve the lease agreement and authorize all necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Councilmember Ballard, item 5A.
Thank you. I already spoke with staff a little bit about this, but the change order seems significant, so I just wanted to give the opportunity to talk about it a little bit.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. Aaron Henning with Public Works and Utilities. Yeah, it is a rather sizable change order. This project is Century 2 elevators, replacing single jack lifts with double jack lifts, which is required by code. There's no grandfathering them in. Staff is not experts in elevators. We engaged an expert to help develop specifications for this project. Went out for bid for this project during the pre-bid meetings. This concern was raised that perhaps the oil might be contaminated. So there was an addendum done with the bid to add testing to the contract, but it did not go so far as to add remediation, not knowing what the testing would show. So unfortunately, the testing did show that the hydraulic oil does have PCBs in it. So now it's going to require a pretty extensive cleanup effort to remove that oil, get the contaminants out, and then safely dispose of them. I think one of the disposal sites for some of the equipment that will come out that I think is the casings and maybe the cylinders is in Utah. So they're going to have to transport that all the way out to Utah to do that. So it is costly, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. We'll open it up for public comment regarding this item. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you. I move to approve the change order number 1 and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Councilmember Hoy. Motion passes 7-0. We'll now move to item number 10. I'd like more clarification regarding this item, maybe from Reggie or whomever from staff can answer questions. This is a $700,000 to $750,000 project, but this in particular only takes into account $450,000. Can you please explain the difference and what this project is?
Sure. Tim Kellums, Public Works Utilities. The idea here is that we would use a guaranteed maximum price. So the consultant would come on board and do public engagement to figure out exactly the scope of the project, mostly engaging with the community. Central Riverside Park is one of our highest used park. And we envision this being a highly used playground. Didn't want to move forward without having a robust amount of public engagement with that. Given the size and intended and expected use for the playground, figured that we would need to use 2026 funding to help supplement this. The guaranteed maximum price that we had planned to have in this RFQ would then come back to City Council for approval, and then we would initiate 2026 money at that time. And then the project would get rolling further. So most of this upfront work is to do public engagement, figure out exactly what the community wants, get a pretty good idea on what the design should be. One of the reasons why we're doing or need some help with consultants because there is a bunch of different playground equipment out there, and then if the community says that they want something specific, this allows us a little bit more flexibility rather than trying to pull something from one vendor that we've done in the past. This allows us, again, more flexibility to get and implement designs that the community is looking for. We don't envision this as being kind of your standard playground per se, knowing that this is probably have some type of theming, things like that, knowing the character and history of Central Riverside. So a little bit unique compared to our typical playground.
And what is the total budget? According to an email I received from city manager, it was $700,000 to $750,000. So the max will be $750,000 for this entire project. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what we're budgeting internally. I think between 2025 and 2026, there's $900,000. We plan on using some of that money to address other playgrounds, so we don't intend on using that fully on this playground. Once we get into design and engagement with the community, that budget may come down. Let's say the community wants something different, something that's, maybe they don't want a large tower. Those things start to get expensive. So once we engage with the community, we can kind of right size this to the right amount. It may be a little bit less, but internally we were budgeting about $700,000 to $750,000. Most of that has to do with steel. Most of these playgrounds are steel, and there are different type of safety surfacing. We are moving towards it's called PIP, pour in place surfacing, which is a higher quality and provides less maintenance down the road. We're doing that on most of our playgrounds now. It actually just got done at LW Clap, should you want to go out and take a look at it. It's looking great, and that's kind of the standard premier for safety surfacing, especially for kids, when I believe it's about 60 or 70% of injuries for playgrounds are due to head injuries. So trying to make sure we're having a safe playground out here. So they do cost a little bit more rather than just sand or lower cost options.
Can you tell me how much Clap Park playground equipment costs?
Oh, gosh. So we went a variety of different routes with this. I believe in total, are you asking for just the equipment or everything outside of the equipment as well?
You can break it down into both.
The equipment, I believe, is around $1.2, $1.3 million. Most of the site work outside of that helped add to that cost. We also added a dog park with the project and a parking lot, so that's kind of a little bit hard to break down there. But we also had a separate contract with the vendor to do the safety surfacing, and then the different berms and concrete underneath the safety surfacing gets broken out a little differently. But in terms of playground equipment, it's probably 1.3, somewhere in that range. So this would be quite a bit less because we would have to do the concrete underneath the playground, the safety surfacing on top, removal of an existing one, whereas at Clap, we didn't have to remove an existing playground. So there is some added cost to trying to demo an existing playground, which we'd be doing in this case for Central Riverside.
So that we can have the clear expectation from community, while they may see Clap Park with this playground equipment, that is not necessarily what you will see at Central Riverside Park, just to set expectations clearly.
Sure, and great point. We don't, there's two existing playgrounds out at Central Riverside. One of them has that rubberized surface and was done, I believe, within the last 15 years, 10 to 15 years. It's in pretty good shape. The one that we're concerned about is the sand playground. The sand playground is over 30 years old and doesn't meet our current standards, number one, and number two, it just doesn't provide the play value for our highest use park and pretty much the playground for downtown Wichita. So that one, they expect it to stay by itself and not be used. Again, we'll listen to the public and see what they have to say, but internally, we don't envision touching the larger, I guess, rubberized surface playground. This is mostly focusing on the sand playground, which is a little bit to the south.
And then last but not least, maybe this question is more for the city manager. How does this play into the park master plan?
Good question, Mayor. I was going to actually ask to speak on that. The council has not adopted the philosophy or the policy guidance that will shape the master plan, but you will be involved in that process. What I've been hearing from the council discussions over the last year is a heavier emphasis on our regional parks, and that's this is, as Tim mentioned, this is probably one of the most active parks that we have, and it is, I would classify it as a regional park, same as Clap. But until we know exactly where we're headed with the master plan, I can't tell you if we'll have a heavier emphasis on these types of parks versus smaller neighborhood parks. That will be a determination you'll make going forward. I also want to mention, Mayor, you had asked about the budget for this. We talked about an estimate of $750,000. We'll know more after we go out for the proposals. We're asking for permission to send out an RFP with a design build team. We also have the ability to cap the amount that we put in. And so after we hear back from the design build teams and select a consultant, we can then tell them what the cap will be or what the negotiated price will be. And that will allow us to have additional funding for some of the other parks that are planned for improvements in the next year.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Tim, appreciate the presentation. I just want to add to the public dialogue. We love the rocket at Riverside, and more rockets are not a bad thing. So as people discuss what they want, would love to see more rockets at Riverside.
We'll be happy to share the safety guidelines that we have for playgrounds.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that was what I was going to ask is there going to be any work on the rocket, or is it pretty much just a memorial at this point to days past?
Yes, yeah. The rocket is pretty much a memorial at this point. It's been taken out throughout other communities across the country. It was actually a very popular one throughout the country. I don't know many of them that still have them left, but I'm glad that we still have ours, at least for memory for everyone. But no, unfortunately, does not meet safety standards to play on.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then last question, just want to make sure, since it was mentioned that $900,000 would be allocated for playgrounds in the whole system, and a good chunk would go to Central Riverside Park, have we planned well enough to take care of the other parks and their playgrounds with that amount?
Yes, yeah. We have a number of, kind of the current plan right now is to try to address sand playgrounds. That's kind of the biggest thing. The sand playgrounds, they don't provide impact attenuation, which is basically for those head injuries and fall injuries, as well as the rubberized surface and the wood chips, I guess you could say. So our target right now is to address all of the sand playgrounds as we can. Again, doing new playgrounds tends to get expensive, but we do have repairs throughout the system to different rubberized surfaces or things along those lines. So we try to address those as well, trying to find that right balance between replacement and then making those necessary repairs to different surfaces throughout this park system. As I mentioned, this one, Central Riverside, is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, playground in our park system right now. A few years ago, we took care of O.J. Watson Park, which was at the time one of the oldest ones. So we're slowly going through and checking off and getting through those same playground. Again, most of them are pretty costly to do. So generally, we are only able to address one playground and then try one replacement playground and try to kind of take care of those other, I wouldn't say call them low-hanging fruit, but they still make an impact, but we don't have enough to fully repair or replace a new one. So in this case, given the size and complexity and the impact or the usage that we feel at Central Riverside, thought that allocating 2 years worth would be important and seen as value to the community given the high use at the playground. We do plan to utilize, I believe, Evergreen Rec Center, one of their playground or their safety surface in there. That is also on our list to replace. So there are smaller projects that we are checking off with this money.
Thank you, Tim. And City Manager, you mentioned you're hearing obviously from this council more emphasis on regional parks. Can you address which ones are regional parks?
I think I need Reggie's help on that.
Thank you. I know that we have roughly 120 parks, so I would like to know what you consider regional parks, Reggie.
So what we consider when we look at some of, as regional park, are going to be our larger gathering spaces that we have. McAdams Park will be one of them, LJ. Clapp will be one, Watson Park, Central Riverside will be another location that we consider are kind of the larger ones that we have in our system.
Buffalo also.
Yeah, Buffalo will be a larger one also.
Evergreen?
Evergreen is considered more of a community park than a larger regional park.
O.J. Watson?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I see no further questions for staff. We'll now open it up for public comment regarding this item.
Hi, I'm Shania. I was just wondering, with the parks, would they be able to put any like military activities or rock wall climbing, something more physical activity for the kids, besides swings and slides?
Councilmember Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. To the speaker's point, we do have the National Fitness Court over at the Pat Garcia Park over on the north end that you use all of your own body weight to get a full body workout. It's very impressive. I would highly encourage you to check it out. Okay.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. To the point of your question, there's going to be a lot of public engagement going forward on that. So I know Tim hears that, but if you ever attend any of the meetings or any way that they're taking that feedback, definitely share that.
Any further comments?
I'm going to stay here. I'm going to talk. No, I'm the president of Grandview Heights Neighborhood Association, where Clapp Park sits. We appreciate it's long overdue. That dang COVID kind of kicked us in the butt, but it's going to get done mid-May or something. But we appreciate the new dog park and the new multi-purpose. So I just wanted to pass that on. Eventually, we finally got it. Still waiting on the bike path from Woodlawn to the river, but that's coming also 6 years late. But I think they were just waiting until I couldn't ride a bike. But anyhow, thank you.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. June 4th at 11 a.m., I believe, will be the ribbon cutting for the all-access playground at Clapp Park. Playground that is designed so that way all kids, including kids with disabilities, will be able to get out there and play and slide for the kids in the wheelchairs, zip line for kids in wheelchairs, swings for kids in wheelchairs. It's really neat. So June 4th, get as many people out there as we can.
Thank you for the public comment. I see no further comments. We'll bring it back to the bench. I will move to, if it's okay with Councilmember Ballard, this is in your district, but I will move to approve this item since I pulled it. I move to approve the Progressive Design Build Project Implementation Strategy, Project Delivery, and RFQ Criteria.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Yeah, none of ours work. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated April 21st, 2025.
Morning, Mayor, City Council, Josh Slauber, Department of Finance. The Board of Bids and Contracts convened yesterday, April 21st, 2025 for the following items. For engineering, we have the 2025 Outsourced Pavement Preservation Program, CIP Microsurfacing and Street Repair for PPJ Construction Incorporated for $3,932,000 awarded within the engineer's estimate from the original bid. We have the Hearst Street and Beach Street to serve Town Park 10th Edition Phase 2 for Conspec Incorporated doing business as Kansas Paving for $171,269.60. We have the Water Distribution System to serve Town Park 10th Edition Phase 2 for Dueling Construction Company Incorporated for $68,315. For purchasing, we have 2 high-pressure sewer cleaner trucks for Elliott Equipment Company for an aggregate total of $773,714. We have the interior and exterior modifications of 7 single-family homes for Gray & Sons Construction LLC for an aggregate total of $500,000. We have for the ground maintenance services, production and pumping contract change order for Choice Industries Incorporated doing business as Choice Landscaping and Lawn Care, adding the 21st and Hoover Admin Building for $15,000. We have the veterinary consulting services contract change order requesting your authorization to renew the contract for another year for the rates listed with Kansas Humane Society, doing business as Kansas Humane Society. We have the liquid chlorine bulk delivery contract change order for Brentag Southwest Incorporated, requesting your authorization to extend the contract 60 days. We have trash and recycling containers and collection for Transit Police and Library contract change order for Waste Management of Kansas Incorporated for the amended amount of $39,397.92 estimated per year. And we have the false alarm registration and management services contract change order for Central Square Technologies, requesting your authorization to extend the contract for 90 days. This is how to become a vendor with the city. This is a purchasing calendar of small resource partner events and items that the city will be hosting or participating in. And these are open public opportunities out on the street today. And I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions, and I recommend your approval.
Thanks, Josh. Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Ballard.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Josh, could we go to page 8?
Sure.
It just said there's no other bids received.
Correct.
So we're just taking the only bid that we got?
It is the only responsive bid, and it met within the budget of the department request.
Okay. Do we ever ask any other businesses that we send it out to, like why they're not interested, or?
Yeah,
It seems like a very large project to only get one bid.
Yeah, we do. That's a great question. It comes up frequently. We'll ask our contractors what they're seeing in the market, and a lot of it is labor. A lot of it is the influx of federal funding you're seeing, that the labor market is tight and they're not able to either complete the work, or the work that they're bidding is so high that it's not cost reasonable. But it's really difficult to tell why vendors aren't bidding. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then page 11.
Yeah.
So I received several emails about this, and I see that there's some people from animal control here. It sounds like there's been several core requests to make sure that the vaccines are actually being given. That seems to be the main sticking point in the emails that I have received. Do we know anything about that, or?
Yeah, I would have to defer to Wichita Police Department.
Thank you.
The question on the vaccines being given at intake, is that?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. The staff at our front desk is trained to give those. That's the DAPT for cats and the Bordetella Parvo for dogs.
So I guess my question is, why are the core requests for the data being denied? I think she has requested it like 4 times.
I'm not for sure on all the core request stuff. I know there was one time I had asked, but I would have to pull the records for each individual animal, which would take me forever to do. But yeah.
I don't know. Does anybody else have any questions? It seems to be the concern is that they're wanting to make sure that the vaccines are actually being given, considering the amount that we're paying.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you. I guess a follow-up to Councilman Ballard's comments. I imagine we track the vaccines in a database when they're administered.
Yes, there's the way it's done is that we have what's called a medical screen in our records management system. And so when it's given, an entry's made in that screen. I don't have a report where I can pull that data, so I have to individually query each individual animal to go into that screen to find it.
So our system doesn't allow just an export of all of those documents.
I would have to work with our vendor to get a report for that. And I can do that, it's not a problem.
I'll have a follow-up question. So it's intake vaccines is $2,500 per month. On average, how many vaccines are administered with the $2,500 a month?
We take in 9,000 to 10,000 animals a month, so maybe 800. I don't have the specific numbers, but it's a lot.
800 vaccines per month?
Yeah, we take in 9,000 to 10,000 animals a year, so just dividing that by 12.
Okay, 9,000 to 10,000 per year.
Yeah.
You initially said months.
I'm sorry, yeah, 9,000 to 10,000 per year.
Per year, okay, got it. So 800 on average per year vaccines.
Per month.
Per month?
We're doing the same thing now.
So you were asking, who was asking for that information?
One of my constituents has been asking for the numbers of are the animals getting the vaccines that we're paying for them to get. And if you could work with your vendor, I don't know what that looks like, but it seems like a really easy ask, but I'm
I definitely
super
will.
techie on all of that stuff. But I think maybe it's obviously important to some people that are requesting it, I guess. Yeah.
If your constituent wants to reach out to me, she can come to the shelter and I will show her the medical records if she wants to see that.
Pass the word.
Thank you. Josh? Slide number 9. Can you explain, are these the single-family homes that will be remodeled so that they can become affordable housing here in the community?
For housing.
Good morning, Mayor, members of council. Sally Stang with the Housing Department for the record. These are part of the public housing units. We are expending additional capital funds received to renovate those units to put back into the market as newly rehabbed units once sold.
So they will become affordable housing in the community?
Correct.
Thank you very much, Sally. And thank you, Sally, for hosting the Greater Housing Conference last week. Again, the big topic was affordable housing in our community, and so we appreciate seeing that houses will be remodeled so that they can become affordable housing yet again for the community. Thank you. Josh, thank you very much. I see no further questions for you or any staff. These do not get public comment, sir.
They mentioned something about the Animal Advisory Board. I'm on the Animal Advisory Board, and the question I'm pretty sure this Maggie's talking about.
There's no public comment regarding that, sorry, George. But we did have staff speak on behalf of that. You could talk to Captain Purcell.
I can talk to that wall, too. Thank you.
I will move to approve the Board of Bids and Contracts.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Public hearing and request by Lang Gen Y LLC for approval of a letter of intent to issue industrial revenue bonds.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, Troy Anderson, Assistant City Manager. So this item was presented to you all last week. It was deferred to today. There was some questions that we had provided answers to yesterday. But just real fast, running through the slide deck. Again, Lang Gen Y is a real estate holding company that will lease to Lang Companies, the subject property. The requesting issuance of revenue bonds in the amount of $3 million for renovation of the former Royal Caribbean Call Center building. Lang recently purchased the building, plans to use it for their corporate headquarters. Renovations include exterior refresh, redesign front entry lobby, second floor remodel, basement facilities. The plan is that construction would begin immediately, be completed by the end of the year. This request is for sales tax exemption only. Approximate value of the sales tax exemption to all taxing jurisdictions, $112,000, city share of which is about $8,700. Again, we kind of share this with all revenue bond applications. Revenue bonds are a mechanism for achieving either a sales tax exemption and or a property tax abatement. In a revenue bond transaction, the city is not lending any money, bears no risk. Company is required to acquire all of its own financing. There is no taxpayer dollars that are at risk in this transaction. All costs are borne by the company requesting the use of the bonds. Lang agrees to pay all the cost of issuing the bonds, agrees to pay the annual origination fees. Bonds will be purchased by Lang or a related entity. The bond documents will be prepared by outside counsel, but ultimately law department will review and approve the final form of the bond documents prior to the issuance of any bonds. With that being said, staff's recommendation, the city council adopt the resolution, authorize the necessary signatures, and we do have representatives from Lang here to answer any questions you might have today.
Thanks, Troy. We'll begin with Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor Troy. I have a few questions. Some will be the same as last week. Some might be a little bit different. First off, what has changed in this document since last week? Is there any updates to the agenda packet? It's the exact same request as made previously?
Correct. Yep. It was deferred in this context. Again, there were some questions that were asked by City Council last week. We provided response to those in an email yesterday. So as it stands for the application, nothing has changed from the deferral last week.
If we were to vote on this, is the sales tax exemption contingent on anything except the construction of the $3 million of fixtures and equipments from Lang? So is there any jobs tied to this? Is there any requirement that they have to uphold as a benefit to the taxpayers to receive the sales tax exemption?
To answer the first part of the question, it is performance-based. Yes, they must complete the improvements that they say they want to perform, right? And so upon completion of the improvements is when we bring all of those sort of receipts back, and that's when we issue the bonds for the bond issuance process. No, there are no jobs that are required as part of a sales tax exemption. That was one of the questions that was asked last week. We went back, we did some research. The laundry list kind of went on and on, so we kind of just stopped. It didn't take us very long. We went to back about 2023. There were at least 12 different revenue bond applications that city council had reviewed and approved, and none of those required any jobs.
So I looked at the requests made in 2024 and 2025. That's just since I've been here. So I didn't go back to 2023. In 2025, Commonwealth was affordable housing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In 2024, Empower and Orpheum were both nonprofits, correct?
I didn't dig into the actual contents of the application, so I don't have that.
Okay.
But
But those requests, Empower and Orpheum, were nonprofit entities.
I believe so, yes.
And then housing, just to make sure I have all my information correct, Timbers, Mako, 212 Market, Opco, Hyde, and 333 English were all housing projects.
I'd have to go back and confirm that, but that sounds.
I just want to make sure that there might not be one that wasn't a housing project.
No, I'd have to go back and confirm that, but that sounds about right.
And then so out of 2024 and 2025, it looks like the only one that may be different would be the Clemens Aviation, which was on the Airport Agenda Authority Board, not the City Council agenda. And my understanding is that the airport, any projects on Airport Authority are exempt from property taxes, correct? So there would be no option for Clemens Aviation to come for a property tax exemption. They would have had to seek the sales tax exemption.
That's correct.
Okay. I was just trying to make sure that I had the right context, especially with the different applications. So this one is unique in that in 2024 and 2025, it's the only one that would be a not a nonprofit or a housing request.
That could very well be.
Okay. In terms of the ROI to the city, you had sent kind of pro forma regarding the 420 or 4729 South Palisade information. Could you elaborate on the ROI to the city? How long do we get the full investment back based on if we were to offer the sales tax exemption today?
Yeah, so I had a couple of extra slides prepared just in case the questions were asked. This slide here talks a little bit about how we've arrived at where we are today, right? So I can come back to this slide if you need me to. But as far as ROI, really, really high level, what we had prepared to you all were sort of three scenarios. We took the 2025 sort of combined property tax and sales tax, what it would look like in 2026, and then ultimately kind of carried that out to a 10-year projection, which is why you see 2035. So you see in the first 6 rows, currently in 2025, the appraised value is about $1.8 million, resulting in an assessed value of about $450,000. So the overall tax obligation to all taxing jurisdictions, about $52,000 a year. City shares about just under $15,000 a year. So what we added here in this next line is the City of Wichita sales tax exemption that is being sort of considered here today, right? It's a value of about $8,700, which is why you don't see it in 26, 27 beyond, clear out to 2035. It's sort of a one-time, but combining property tax and sales tax into a combined. So if you looked at sort of the balance, right, of what you see here in this first column is the various net gain or net loss positions by the city, combining both property tax and sales tax. The first row there that you see at the bottom is the net gain without a sales tax exemption. So if for whatever reason City Council does not approve the sales tax exemption, and let's just say for a moment that they do go ahead and do the project anyway, the city's net gain would be that $8,700 in 2025. That's the only additional net gain the city would see in sort of 2025. The next scenario that you see there is that net gain with the sales tax exemption, right? So let's say you do approve the sales tax exemption, they go on and do the project as they have anticipated. The city's net gain in 2025 would be zero. We will have foregone that sales tax. Again, about $8,700. The last scenario I presented to you all is sort of that idea of if you all don't approve the sales tax exemption and for whatever reason, they don't do the project, right? So without the project, again, we don't realize those sales taxes anyway. City's net gain position is still zero in 2025. In 2026, the numbers you see there at the top assume that the project is completed, right? So you see that uptick in appraised value from about 1.8 to about 4.3 million. So we spent some time with our real estate division. We analyzed, kind of looked at some other comparables in and around the area. We figured that it's probably not going to get back up to the $7 million appraised value that it was a couple years ago. Best case scenario is it's probably going to increase from 1.8 to 4.3 for the 2026, which then changes all of the assessed values, general tax obligation, city share. Again, you'll notice there's no sales tax exemption in 2026. And then you see that sort of compounding balance that's added in 2026. You see the net gain position in 26 without the sales tax exemption, with the sales tax exemption, and without the project, we actually start sort of losing money, right? In that last scenario, I kind of put that asterisk explanation down there at the bottom that when we looked at the net gain without the project, what we've seen is about a 3% decline since 2023. We saw in 2024 a 3% decline. Let me back up. In 2024, we saw the appeal and the reduction in the property. In 2025, we saw about a 3% reduction. So our estimates assume that there's a continued 3% reduction in the property value over the next 10 years if the project doesn't go forward. So you see there, clear out to 2035, that without the sales tax exemption, if the project moves forward, the city is in a position to sort of gain about $416,000 in property tax and sales tax without the sales tax exemption. The next one is the net gain with the sales tax exemption, about $407,000. Again, that difference is that $8,700 sales tax exemption. The last row is without the project. Again, over a 10-year period, our net loss position is about $4,000. So that's a really lengthy explanation. I hope that kind of answers.
No, that's helpful, and I'm thankful for the analysis. Thank you for preparing it. That's something I requested last time. So there's two assumptions made in this. First assumption is this project will not move forward unless the city grants a sales tax to get this performant, correct?
There's three assumptions. There's the assumption that the project goes forward either without the sales tax exemption or with the sales tax exemption. Those are modeled two different, that delta is the $8,700. The third assumption is if the sales tax exemption is not granted and the project doesn't move forward, that's the third.
So the city still has the gain, even if the sales tax assumption, if we don't award the sales tax, correct? And that's the first line.
Correct.
The second line is if we do. So that's one assumption. Another assumption is that this is the property tax that we'll receive if there's not a property tax abatement in the future.
That's correct.
So if the applicant comes with a property tax abatement in the future, then it could negate at least a portion of the gains realized on this performance, correct?
And ultimately, at that point in time, what the applicant would qualify in a property tax abatement and what the cost-benefit analysis would show as a result of kind of that ongoing either additional capital investment or jobs created, absolutely would completely overhaul this model.
So this is the highest possible gain the city could receive, given if the applicant doesn't come back for a property tax exemption.
As well as a number of other assumptions, such as the appraised value, et cetera, but yes.
Does the applicant plan on coming back with a property tax exemption later?
I'd have to defer to the applicant at that point.
Can we have the applicant come forward?
Mayor, Council, thank you for having us today. Appreciate your time.
The direct question was, will you be seeking property tax abatement?
At this point, it is on the table. This project is part of what is a planned multiple phased expansion and of what we call the advanced manufacturing facilities for Red Guard Manufacturing, which is located here in South Wichita, as well as the Lang planned corporate headquarters with the exclusion of the real estate division. So at this point, we are working on a multitude of different elements of that in planning and diligence stages currently. it is on the table that we could likely be coming back for an abatement that would be requested in line with what the cost-benefit analysis and the appropriate return on investment would be to the city of Wichita and for this project specifically.
Last week, a representative from your company said no. So I'm very confused right now, because if we would have passed it last week with that answer, knowing that you actually are going to be asking for property tax abatement, the answer immediately from me would have been no. So I feel misled right now.
I apologize for that, and he is not here today. Apologize for that. Our intent was not to mislead this council and this governing body in any way. Our intent was to make sure that this project is planned and organized in a fashion that is eligible and most applicable for the utilization of these incentives. And we approach all of our projects through that lens and with that intent. He did not have that information available to him last week to be able to probably answer you adequately in your comment or your question to him. I apologize for that.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. This question is more for Troy. Thank you for attending. So Troy, you and I met last week to chat about this because I'm a little confused.
Yep.
I understand there's, different scenarios and different questions, but the most basic answer is, did the applicant meet all of the requirements for this to come to us?
Yes.
Okay. And if we wanted to have future discussions of sales tax abatement, maybe just for nonprofits or for housing or, whatever, that could be a future discussion. But in theory, did the applicant meet all of the requirements for this to be approved today?
As those requirements are spelled out in the economic development guidelines, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Troy, just real quick, are the assumptions on the net gain that any future council would take in the full valuation of the property and not partial? Like, is this tied to any type of property valuations going forward as those continue to go up? So is the assumption that a council
Gotcha.
would fully take in the property valuations and not like cap it at inflation rates?
Our model simply took into consideration a very modest 3% inflationary adjustment. If for whatever reason, again, this model, if in 2026 that appraised value isn't 4.3, obviously all of these numbers change. If in 2027 we see a 7% increase in those valuation, again, all of these numbers change. So our modeling simply assumed an approximate 3% inflationary adjustment year over year from 2026 to 2035.
Okay.
I see no further questions for staff. We will now open it up for public comment. I see no one from the public. We will bring it back to the bench. This resides in Councilmember Glasscock's district. Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be interested to hear what they have as far as the presentation goes.
Could the applicant please come forward and share plans for this location?
Yes. So plans for this location, the former Royal Caribbean building, now rebranded as Portico Chase, is for the consolidation and active recruitment and for the Lang corporate offices and specifically also Red Guard manufacturing, administrative, engineering employees, the project management teams, the sales teams, and the executive teams. Approximately 90 of the existing jobs will be located at this facility in addition to the active recruitment and fulfillment of current jobs that we have active across the Lang companies. So that ranges from, like I described, administrative to executive to manufacturing jobs that would be here, as well as one of the more recent initiatives that we've been working on that is a joint venture and a investment into a technology firm that would be helping facilitate the smart shipping containers that we are planning to do here that will create a handful of jobs here, approximately 5 to 6, technology-based, as well as all of the shared services and support services needed for the use of that. In addition, we have been actively working within a division of Redguard and Lang Companies is Modual, which is a modular QSR, quick service restaurant manufacturing capability, where we have been able to achieve success in working for some national franchisees brands. I think it's important to also understand that about 95% of the manufacturing product that is built in the city of Wichita is exported outside of the state of Kansas. So those jobs are retained, created, actively recruited to this market with intentionality. This is home for Lang Companies and Redguard, and has all plans to remain as such. The reason in part that this request is being brought initially is, again, this is phase 1 of what is a multiple phased plan. Across the street from Portico Chase is the Redguard current production center, where final assembly and manufacturing takes place. We are actively working on a expansion plan for our advanced manufacturing capabilities here in the city of Wichita. Most of the, again, 95% of this product is shipped outside of the state of Kansas in order to make sure that we are as competitive as we need to be and be able to grow and continue to experience success and continued success into the future, setting up this administrative facility, executive offices, the support offices for this manufacturing effort is the first phase of Portico Chase, and where the offices and all that I described would be held. Does that answer your question, council member?
Yeah, I was just wanting to give you guys an opportunity to talk a little more about this.
And sorry if I,
go ahead.
the other part of that is part of the property tax abatement. There are some qualifications as it relates to state incentives. So we, through HPIP and some other state-led incentive programs based around manufacturing, we want to make sure that we are coupling any property tax abatement requests related to this IRB in its best form, and that the city of Wichita is receiving its best return on investment, and that we are packaging that adequately. We acquired this property about a little over a year ago, came kind of together fairly quickly. We had to act very fast. It sat empty for some period of time post-COVID when Royal Caribbean moved their corporate offices out of here in Sales Center. And we acquired this property for about $2.25 million. We immediately put about $803,000 of improvements into the building when we acquired it to get it into functional, semi-functional form or safe and habitable form, from new roof to certain mechanical systems to securing the facility. The prior owner was spending a tremendous amount of money in security and policing this facility because of transient trespassing that was taking place on the property. So this is an example of Lang Companies making active investment in South Wichita, and I think you've continued to see that, and we plan for you to continue to see that. So we have a number of projects in South Wichita, from the Paddock Industrial Park to the Saddle Creek Crossing redevelopment to One Rise Behavioral Health Campus to Iron Horse Industrial Park, all of which are economic development, stimulators and grow. And we do that across the city of Wichita. We are actively reinvesting into the city of Wichita and plan and intend to continue to do that. This is a measure to help ensure that we are putting this project and it's able to happen, and that this project is able to realize its best potential, in my opinion.
When would you guys plan on bringing the property tax portion of this to council?
I believe in this calendar year. I think it could be the latter part of this calendar year. The advanced, manufacturing facility and planning around it is going to take a little bit more time and development to understand exactly what is the right project to build there and what are all of the needs that as we look into the future of what Red Guard Manufacturing is currently and where it's planning to go. So I would anticipate it to be this calendar year. I apologize for being vague, but I would imagine sometime in third quarter of this year, I would anticipate that we have that organized well enough and understand from the states inside of this as well how to appropriately package that and bring that to this governing body.
Thank you.
You're currently located at 47th and Broadway Southeast corner. What will happen to that location?
Mayor, the real estate office was located there. We have relocated that to 1101 West Douglas in Delano there on the southwest corner. There's approximately about 6,000 square feet of that retail center formerly occupied by Kmart days back. So we have seen tremendous activation of that location with this is really the only current vacancy right now, and we're in active negotiations with a health-related provider for potential lease-up of that space. We developed the out parcels in that location as well with Club Car Wash and a host of others that has really enhanced and brought that area to life. And I think the investment there has been demonstrated as well.
Sorry, I have a couple of more questions that I should have asked during questions, but you mentioned 95% of your manufacturing is actually exported out of Wichita, Kansas. And one of the criteria that I look for when I look for IRB approving of these projects is jobs. And I know you can't say exactly, but
sure.
Currently, how many employees do you have at Red Guard, and how many do you plan to hire further? I think you said 90 existing jobs, but you also have some vacancies. Do you expect to continue increasing the number of employees at Red Guard?
Absolutely, yes, and increasing them, growing them here. The plan is in the city of Wichita. So when I speak to 90 jobs, that is the amount of jobs that we plan to occupy if we move this project forward immediately into the Portico Chase building. This building can adequately house around 220 to 250 employees. So we purchase this with the plan for continued growth, and we see that across really all of the Lang companies and the segments and the business units that they touch. So without making you a promise of what that exact job total would be, there would be 90 new jobs. What I can tell you is that there's 5 to 8 full-time positions related to the smart shipping containers in the technology base that are new, that would be created for this location and filled. There are approximately 8 existing posted openings within the Lang companies right now that we're actively recruiting and trying to fill. So I would anticipate that this location would create roughly 13 to 16 full-time roles between shared services as well as those business segments that I spoke to. The other would be Modulal. Modulal is a rapidly growing company. We've been in kind of organization of that business segment now for probably 3 years and have finally been able to garner some momentum on manufacturing the modular QSRs that would, and most of that client base is outside. Most of those units are being shipped outside of the state of Kansas as well.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. And this is a question, not a comment. Is that just because we're having the discussion, if I could bring Troy back up again, please? Thank you. I have 2 questions for you, and if I should know the answer to either of these, I apologize. regarding sales tax abatement, is there a requirement that jobs have to be a part of it?
No.
Okay. Is there a way, and this is just making sausage from the bench, but because I think if I can hear my colleagues, that's the concern, right? But it isn't a requirement, so, there wasn't a box that wasn't checked if this got approved. But if we said in the future Lang did want to come forward with a property tax abatement, that there could be, then there is requirements for jobs, correct? Or
No.
could we say there's a requirement?
You could, right? So.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so.
Because I see what the angst is. I mean, I understand, but I just am cognizant of the fact that they followed all the rules and they checked all the boxes for this application. From what I understand, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I would welcome anyone to correct me. But then, since the jobs are the angst, how could we maybe do something for that in the future?
Yeah, so.
Go.
Let me talk a little bit about jobs real fast without going down a rabbit hole too far, right? Part of where jobs has come into the conversation, not with sales tax exemption, but with property tax abatement, was years ago, there was the cost-benefit analysis model that only looked at the 10-year window in which a property tax abatement was being considered. So if you can imagine, just for a moment, really, really high level, right, that if I'm only looking at the 10-year abatement window and I'm taking sort of tax dollars off the table, I'm immediately operating in the red, right, from a negative position. So what came into the conversation was job creation, right? And so as part of the cost-benefit analysis model, the number of jobs that were created offset the sort of loss in potential property tax revenue. Another way to look at that, and we've been working closely with Wichita State University, Center for Economic Development Business Research, previously Jeremy Hill, now Craig Compton, right, is not just looking at that 10-year window, but what does the 15 and the 20-year window look like, right? If you can imagine, even if we're looking at just the capital investment, and we're also seeing a lot of, with new technology and new projects that are coming to market, manufacturing, equipment, et cetera, right? You're seeing extremely large capital outlays being invested in our community, which then ultimately drives ad valorem property taxes, particularly in years 11, 12, 13, and beyond, right? So if now all of a sudden you're looking at that 15-year pro forma or that 20-year pro forma, it's very reasonable to anticipate and expect that, I'm just gonna guess here, but by year 15, the additional property taxes that are added to the tax roll, not just for the city of Wichita, but for all taxing jurisdictions, by sort of say year 15, will offset any property tax abatement that you might have created in years 1 through 10 without creating any jobs, right? And so it's all about kind of how you look at the cost-benefit analysis and that term by which you're evaluating sort of the return on the investment. That's where jobs came into the conversation, was sort of offset that if all you were looking at is the 10-year window. There's nothing that specifically requires job creation as part of any project and any consideration as part of either a sales tax or property tax abatement. But job creation is incredibly important, just as you heard job retention, right? When we talk about jobs and talent, we talk about talent retention and we talk about talent attraction. So jobs are incredibly important, and the creation of additional jobs are incredibly important to this community. I don't want to dismiss any of that, right? But there's not a requirement that you actually create any jobs, but job creation can help improve the ratio in a cost-benefit analysis to achieve the desired outcomes. That may be too much information, but.
Mayor, may I supplement? This is somewhat a nuanced issue. What Troy indicated regarding capital investment and the calculation beyond 10 years really, in my mind, only works if you're talking about a sizable capital investment, not just a remodeling of offices or of a building, but when you'd have substantial improvements or new construction. That's why we've relied on job creation for so long and also used a 10-year window for that analysis. When we talked about introducing long-term benefit from capital investment, we were looking at some of the larger projects in the city, and especially in the manufacturing area. So I just want to kind of put a little different spin on what Troy's talking about. I still believe, and maybe we have a little bit of a staff disagreement, but I believe that if a company comes in with a request for property tax abatement, if they don't have a substantial capital investment, I think then we really are going to be heavily reliant on the job creation during that 10-year window, as we always have been. And that will be reflected in the model that Wichita State runs for us on benefit cost analysis.
Councilmember Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I see both sides of this. I really like what the land company's doing. I like local companies expanding, not just giving to companies that come in from outside. So support local companies. That being said, this is the first time that we're giving a sales tax exemption to a private business to build a corporate office. That I have a problem with. Come back with a property tax abatement for expanding your business, manufacturing. I don't have a problem with that. I fully support that. But I do have a problem with giving a sales tax exemption for a corporate office. You've already invested $3 million in this building. You could sell it, maybe. It's on the market for quite some time. Before that, it's a good location for you. It's right across the street from your manufacturing facility. I'm not going to support this. I just don't think it's a good precedent that we're setting for businesses to come to us for corporate headquarters, to remodel corporate headquarters. So I think you understand, hope you understand that I do support you. I support your businesses. I think it's great, especially that you want to stay in South Wichita. I think that's fantastic. Property tax abatements for supporting expansion of your manufacturing. Definitely support that. So, but this, I'm just going to tell you my reasoning why I can't support this. So, thank you.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Great comments, truly. And I'm caught in the middle, too. I do think, and Troy, this is just a comment to make. While I completely agree with your comment that we've never done it for a corporate office before, nowhere it says they can't, right? And so if that's the direction of this council, that we need some more guidance in the rulemaking, then that's something that we need to consider, because that, to me, it doesn't say they can't, right? And so that's a little bit of a struggle for me, and might be, this seems like it provides us with an opportunity that we need to revisit some of our tools in our toolkit.
Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments very much. I think this is changing policy for what we give tax exemptions to. Changing policies. It's the first time it's been done. So in essence, we are changing the policy. What's to say the next person that wants to build a new corporate headquarters won't come to us, and they will. They will come to us time and time again. Which I don't think that was the intent of property tax abatements. So that's just my thoughts. Like I say, I do support land companies. I think they're a great company, do a great job. Just my reasoning. I think we're resetting policy here.
Sure.
Thank you.
This is a slippery slope, I think, where we're at, again, because this would set precedent. And so my question to Lang really is this: IRBs are a mechanism for achieving a sales tax exemption and/or, this is very key, and/or a property tax abatement. for so long, we've been giving the and, but never really starting off with the or. And I think that that's where I am having trouble with this, because if we give away the and right away, but don't give the or as an either or option, we're now giving away all these benefits to developers that I don't think is what the intent was. And so, again, I am very concerned about this, and I do believe that this does set a precedent and a slippery slope for another company to come forward and say, let's do this for my corporate headquarters. And I don't believe that that was, again, the intent, and I think that's what I'm hearing from my colleagues. Councilmember Ballard?
I hit her.
Councilmember
I hit it for me,
Hoheisel.
so I appreciate that. Troy, quick question here. So this process, they keep the receipts and then they come back for an abatement on the receipts of the improvements when the project is done. Is that how the sales tax part of this works?
That's correct. All of the expenses that they incur are tallied in preparation for what ultimately is the bond issuance, yes.
So does that count towards receipts that are collected before the IRB passes?
No. So we will not issue a tax exemption certificate until such time as this action, a letter of intent to issue IRBs, is approved and executed.
Okay, so if we motion to delay this until they come with the whole package of property tax included, what they spend in the meantime would not be eligible for reimbursement?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ballard? Or no more? Councilmember Glasscock?
Thank you, Mayor. To the applicant, thank you for investing in South Wichita. Thank you for investing in Wichita in general. I echo Councilman Johnston's comments that I can't in good faith support this. I do think it establishes a precedent. It's very different than the applications that at least come since I've been on the council. So I can only speak from 2024 and 2025, but every single application has been either for a nonprofit entity or for housing, which has been a priority of this council universally. Again, with the exception of the one that was on the airport agenda where they weren't eligible for property tax exemption. I do believe this sets a precedent for other businesses, and I see no benefit to the taxpayers regarding a complete building refresh, updated landscaping, a redesigned front entry, modern landscaping to showcase the company's culture, and a dedicated media room in the existing gym facility. I don't think that's a benefit to the taxpayer. I think what could be a benefit to the taxpayers when you come to the property tax exemption that also adds jobs to the facility and also expands operations. And to, I think, address Councilman Tuttle's point is, yeah, it may have checked every box, but this body also determines the will of the general public and the voters. If we just check everything that checks every checklist and then it comes to the council, then we would just rubber stamp everything from this council. And so I believe we have to take everything on its merit. I think this establishes a precedent, and I've spoken with you all numerous times this week and asked for a holistic approach. I asked you to bring this together with a property tax and tie this contingent on jobs and investment in the area, and that's not what this is. This is a sales tax exemption that's separate than that. And again, thank you for the investment. I will not be supportive of this today, and I'll be offering a motion. I see that Councilman Tuttle's on the agenda, though.
Councilmember Tuttle?
Seem like this is working. There we go. I did not know that there had been a discussion of trying to get it to be combined, because that seems like the best option. And I don't know if anybody's willing, it's your district and I would lean into you, but to even make that substitute motion that we delay this, I think Councilmember Hoheisel kind of alluded to that. And then I just want to make a clarifying statement. The part about, they've followed all the rules doesn't mean that anything other than in the future, we need to address that. If we want guardrails of what we can and we can't, then I think that's our opportunity / responsibility to make sure that people know, oh, I can't apply for this because, and that's not in here. I'm not saying that we should just rubber stamp everything. I'm just saying this is a pause point for us to try and do this better. Is there any thought of a substitute motion? I don't know. It's your district, and I appreciate your thoughts. I did not know those discussions had happened, so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think I've spoken numerous times with the applicant regarding that. I don't have interest in offering this, a substitute motion or to delay it because this was delayed to this week. And I asked to see if there would be a more holistic approach, and it wasn't requested. And so I would be making a motion, I'll be interested in discussion, that we close the public hearing, would deny the resolution, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I have a you're right here, sorry. When do you guys plan on starting the improvements here?
Immediately.
Immediately?
They're through design and ready to commence immediately. Thus, the reason that this is being brought into this current request is in order to accommodate that timing and plan schedule. I think it's, I understand that we're looking from 2023 to 2025. I think that there's other examples and precedent that has been prior set. We could look at Cargill, we could look at other examples in order to retain, keep, and attract corporate headquarters. I think it is very important for me to state that, Redguard, given the type of product that it manufactures, and this facility is not just an office for Redguard. These are the support systems that allow Redguard Manufacturing to be a worldwide leader in the petrochem and blast-contained space, as well as with the Department of Defense, as we look at what we're trying to package for the state of Kansas through some of the eligible programs that are there in order to ensure retention of this company, which is being attracted by multiple other states that it works within currently and has options available to it. And that's not me coming here giving any kind of loaded threat or that, Wichita is home. Wichita will always be home and plan to be home for Redguard. But these type of economic incentives ensure the longevity of these companies to be able to stay in Wichita, remain in Wichita, and put our best foot forward as we're actively recruiting. So to some degree, I challenge you, Councilman Glasscock, from the standpoint of all of these improvements are for job retention, for active job recruitment. We're recruiting, we have a company that is planning on officing here with us as well that now Lang has investment and ownership in around the smart shipping containers, Module, as well as all of the multiple segments that Redguard is already manufacturing within. So I'm challenged a little bit by that statement, candidly. I think that in order to retain and recruit talent for the city of Wichita, this is an important part of being able to successfully do that. And I think that this application has been brought to you, this governing body, with under the lens that it checks the boxes to Councilwoman Ms. Tuttle. I think that we see that as this is very eligible, and there would be a multitude of locations that would accommodate this type of request and support it with what Lang companies have done and what they continue to plan to do in the city of Wichita and otherwise.
So it would not be a help to you if we delay this until you come back with the property tax?
On this initial phase, I think it could be challenged. To be as much of a help, I think that that's a better alternative than denying it today, candidly. But I think that the timing that we're trying to adhere to for occupancy in this building there would be some diminished value to not passing this today. Yeah, and candidly, it'll probably impact the level of which that we evaluate what gets built in the city of Wichita on the next phase. So, the advanced manufacturing facility it plays a part in it. There's those lines cross over significantly as we plan what these next layers of expansion are going to be for this facility.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, because you challenged. I'll offer a challenge back. There are
Sure.
thousands of businesses in this community, literal thousands, that don't make requests for this body.
Sure.
Lang Development in particular has had two this year, one pending regarding a facade improvement at a location on Douglas, regarding a vacation request on 47th Street. This is the sales tax exemption, and then based on your own words, a property tax exemption, and subsequently coming later this summer. And so this body has committed to making sure investments are made in Lang and trying to encourage job creation. But there are thousands of businesses that don't do that, and your business is coming with 4 requests this year. And so there is an assumption that we are trying to support you all as well, but also supporting you when it makes sense, and also allowing private development and private enterprise to happen when it doesn't make sense from this body, when there's not a benefit to taxpayers.
Yeah, and we appreciate City of Wichita's support in all of those measures. And, as we look at, kind of to speak back to that, I think part of the reason why you see those requests is because of the amount of activity that we're driving within this market, and our belief and our love for the City of Wichita, and plan to have that to be continued. Crossgate District in South Wichita has seen in excess of $90 million of Lang-led investment take place in South Wichita that historically didn't exist. This would be another example of that coming. We've activated around 120 plus doors in South Wichita through Sycamore Ponds, an area that was undeveloped and fully stabilized, and a great example of the multitude of segments that we touch. We have about 500 other doors that are in active development in the City of Wichita, with Cypress Glen, which is located on the west boundary of the City of Wichita from Pine Way, and then a multitude of others. North downtown, the area around Ascension has become a targeted area for us. You will see us again, and we will continue to bring appropriate requests that meet the lens in which that they're drafted and what their intent is. So I think part of the reason, Councilman, that you see these requests is because we're not sitting on the sideline and we passively letting others do it. We believe in this, and we believe in the economic opportunities that City of Wichita and the neighboring communities provide, and we want to establish the best. And we do a lot of projects that don't seek any incentive basis. I mean, we do a lot of projects that we don't bring those requests to you because we judge them on our own merit first and make sure that they are adequately qualified for the request that's being brought to a governing body.
There's a motion, and I'm going to second it. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. My machine's not working, so all those in favor say aye. Raise your hand so that the clerk can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
For the motion?
The motion is to deny it.
Deny it, okay.
7-0. Motion is denied. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Approve request for a proposal for a consultant to guide the recruitment and selection process for city manager.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Pam Pennington, Human Resources. So I wanted to spend just a few minutes kind of walking you through the highlights of the draft RFP that you did receive, to kind of give you an indication, kind of a bird's eye view, if you will, of the RFP that we created. So most recruitment activities follow the same process because things have to go in some kind of order before the next thing can take place. But there are two main points that I want to kind of point out here for you that would be different for the city manager search. And this does mirror what we did for the police chief search as well. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about the citizen engagement piece. because that plays a huge role very up front in the process. And so just to give you an idea of what we did for the chief of police search, which we could ask the vendor that's selected to do this same process, is we held a lot of citizen engagement up front. And the reason for that was we needed that input for the vendor to get a very good idea of what needed to be in the job analysis and also what it needed to be in the candidate profile. So just to give you an idea of what that entailed, was we had probably, I would say, 50 people involved in the first focus group, which was citizens that cut across a very wide, broad swath across the city of community leaders. We also had internal stakeholders that we did focus groups with, and these were all led by the vendor. So it was a very neutral activity. We also did internal stakeholders, which included all of the department directors, and we also had a cross-section of all police department personnel. We also had a separate focus group for the Fraternal Order of Police. And then we had a search selection committee that was put together that was throughout the entire process, but they even had their own focus group process. And then in addition to that, while that was all going on, we also had the vendor had created an online community survey, so those comments and engagement could be collected at the same time. So that entire process took us about 4 weeks, and I will tell you the reason for that was because the 4th of July landed in there, so we probably could have gotten it done in 3, but we had a little break because of the holiday. So that is a very big piece of what we're asking for in this RFP, that whoever the submitters are, they need to be able to know how to engage the community in the process. So when you get down from this list to the interview participation, that was the next phase where we also did public engagement. And when the finalists for the role were selected, we actually had a public forum where the public could come forward and get to know the 2 candidates that were the finalists and then also ask them questions. And I thought that was very helpful because the candidates got a sense about what was going on in our community and where the concerns were. And then, of course, the community got a sense of the 2 candidates. So it was really a great forum to allow that additional public engagement. So that is really the 2 additional things we have added to this RFP to make sure that the vendors who are chosen have the capacity and ability to do that. So some of the preferred qualifications, I know you got the draft RFP and there are a litany of things in there. Some of it is things we put in every RFP and some of it is things that we wanted to very well specify for the selected vendor to make sure that they could perform these things. And the first thing was we definitely think 5 years is a minimum that they should have. They've got to have a strong knowledge of municipal government operations. I am very concerned. I want them to have a very specific experience sourcing city manager roles. And then we also put in performance guarantees. I know Councilman Johnson asked about that before, and that is very common for recruiting firms to have that, but we want to make sure that it's in there. And that is a performance not only of the vendor, but also of the candidate. So if the candidate is hired, there's usually a guarantee that if something should happen and they don't make it their first full year, then they will start the process over at no cost. So those were major things we wanted added, plus of course the public engagement piece, that they have to be able to show that they can do that as part of their submittal. So the tentative timeline was also in your RFP draft, and I think this is very doable because we've kind of had experience at this, so we know how to do that, and it also is going to depend on the vendor that is selected. But with approval today, we'd like to get this started on next Monday to get it out there and get the process started. And then you can see there's just some standard things that we do have to put into the RFP process and what those deadlines would be for those as well. And then hopefully We'd have the vendor selected, and council would approve it in early June. I will be the search process lead for this project, and I really coordinate the entire thing. I have a lot of people help me, but I am the main point of contact for the vendor to maintain some consistency in that process. So I've also recommended for your consideration the vendor selection process to have the staff at screening and selection committee, which is the group that will select the vendor. The initial members is definitely representatives from mayor and council, the department directors, and myself to be on that vendor selection committee. And so the recommendation today is that council approve the draft of the RFP that you received for finalization and solicitation and the proposed timeline so we can begin the process of the search for city manager. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Pam. We'll begin with Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Pam. Appreciate the presentation. Actually, your slides answered 3 things I was going to say already. So the 5-year minimum experience I think is good. In this, would it be, I know you said we would be looking for someone who has specific experience around city managers. Would that also ask them percentage of success historically in finding those and percentage of placements that remain more than 24 months? Or is that something that we would want them to just share with us on their own?
Yes, so I think I've added that in the RFP itself, where I'm asking them to give examples of their successful searches.
Okay.
So, and we
saw
can,
that, I just meant the
yeah, we
specific.
can be more clear and ask for percentages, but I'd like to know their most recent and how many.
I think I want to know the more clear, but leaving it open allows them to share what they think we need to know, and then that will, I think, help us make a better decision on that.
Sure, absolutely.
On the public engagement, I agree with that. Having been around out of office and in office for police chiefs, I loved how we went and engaged the community in that way. Well, we also asked them on the back end outside of the one public forum, because I think with the chiefs, we took the candidates around to different groups as well.
Yes.
Okay. And then much like how you brought up the police chief search, and the FOP had a special one-on-one session, I think the managers total should have that. Bob having so much experience and kind of knowing hurdles in Wichita, and then also our 2 assistant city managers, is to talk with them as well about just their thoughts on what another manager could be, maybe what will be facing them, and just kind of having their input from the city manager office. I think that would be good as well.
Absolutely.
I think that is everything I have, but I'm definitely supportive of all of that front end engagement as well as taking the candidates. One of these questions on the original draft was a short list. So I was thinking no less than 2 candidates and maybe up to 4, or if we wanted to odd number 5. I don't know if that's too many. But if we just have 2 and we get into a situation where neither one might be what the public or overall majority of groups and everything want, rather than go back out if we had 3, that might help.
Yeah, and I think that depending on the interviews we do with the vendors themselves, we're going to be able to answer some of that as well, as to what are they seeing, how many candidates do they think is realistic. So we might get that more from the interview from the vendors.
Okay.
As
that
well.
was all I had. Thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Ballard.
That's me again. Appreciate that. Councilmember Johnson kind of touched on it. Yeah, on page 4, part 4, they talk about a short list of no less than 6 to 10 top candidates. That does seem a little much. I think we had 2 finalists for police chief. And I can't remember, was that 2 to 4 was what we did for that RFP?
Yeah, the finalist ended up being 2, but I think the 6 to 10 is where we start with doing the initial interviews. And so then we get down to the 2 finalists. So this number, the 6 to 10, that's how many qualified candidates we're asking for before we even start the first set of interviews.
Okay, I appreciate that. That clears it up a little bit, because I thought that was a little high there, and I didn't know how many. Okay, so it comes to us with 6 to 10, and then we start parsing it down.
Correct.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Pam?
Yes.
I know you spoke to the Wichita Police Chief's selection process. Can you reiterate the 2008 process and why we now have a request for a guarantee? Because if I remember correctly, a couple of weeks ago, City Manager Layton alluded to that, and I think we should all be on the same level of information. Can you talk about the 2008 process? Was there a search firm? Can you talk about, were there any guarantees? Can you talk about that?
I actually do not have information on the 2008 firm search. Bob may remember better than me, but I was not here in 2008, and all I have is the RFP from 2008. I could not find any other documents.
City Manager Layton?
Yes, Mayor. I was not involved in the first round of this, but the council selected a consultant. Consultant went through an exhaustive process with the mayor and council. I believe there was some community involvement at that time. The candidate was selected, was offered the position, and it's my understanding that that individual at the very end of the process decided not to come to Wichita, not to move into the position. So that firm, operating under its guarantee requirement, then started the process all over and went through solicitation. And I think I've outlined what that process was that they followed for the second search.
Thank you, City Manager. Vice Mayor Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the presentation. There's about 26 days for firms to get their proposals in to you. Is that a normal amount of time? Is that enough time for companies to get their proposals together?
I think it is. In the past 2 years, I've been collecting firms already that specialize in municipalities or city manager roles. So right now I'm at 30 firms that across the United States. I've reached out to all of them, asked who should be getting the RFP invitation, and they've all responded. So they're very excited to see this come through. So that's 30 firms right there.
Okay. When would the public engagement occur? Occur after the firm is selected?
Yes.
Okay,
Because it's very important that the vendor control that process as a third party. And so that is this first part of the job analysis and candidate profile. That's what the firms usually do in order to get as much information as they can to build the profile and the job that they're going to market. So they need all of that in order to do that. So they would do that up front before we would ever have them start marketing the position.
And then is a month long enough, or a short month, from May 23rd to June, whenever our third meeting is in June? Is that enough time to evaluate the candidates?
For the vendors?
For the vendors?
I think that it is. I think that it is.
How many do you?
It's hard to tell. I can tell you when we did the police chief, the firms that we really wanted to submit, they ended up declining because they already had enough work. So, you just don't know who all's really going to have the capacity to do that. We're hoping that we get a good response. And, we'll get people too that aren't on my list, that will submit. So we're just trying to make sure we get the most qualified up front. But I think that actually we can do that. It is doable to finalize the list and get a list so we can start selecting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Can you address who was the firm that helped select the police chief and where were they out of?
Public Sector Search, and they were out of California. And they specialized in police chief search.
And in 2008, who was that firm?
Slavin and Associates.
Of where?
don't quote me, I think out of Atlanta at the time.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? I see none. We will now open it up for public comment regarding this item. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. One question for you, Pam, really quick. This says the financial consideration is approximately 30% of the position salary. Can you give us a number, please?
Let's see, based on what Bob shared last time, that would be probably in the, $50,000 to $60,000 range. 30 higher. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, 75,000. Sorry. Can't do math in my head.
So it would be upwards, above $70,000 for a consultant to be part of this process. I also want to, I guess, make a challenge. If there are any firms, either locally, whether it's in the city or in the state, to also be solicited, I would encourage the process to also reach out to the League of Kansas Municipalities, U.S. Conference of Mayors, National League of Cities. The city managers have an organization that City Manager Layton belongs to. These are all obvious groups that should be aware of this RFP process. So it's just my challenge that, again, since the consultant was hired back in 2008 to lead this process, and now we're here 16 plus years later, another consultant will be hired to help with the process. Pam, can you just one more time address why you guys cannot do it in-house and why that process requires someone with expertise?
I think in this level of role, you really do need a professional that can handle the community engagement piece. I think having a third party that is more neutral in the process is also very good for these high-level roles. I'm not saying we couldn't do it, but there is a lot of work that the firm would do that takes that load from staff.
Thank you, Pam. With that, again, because we've had a consultant for 2008 and now a new consultant for 2025, I will move to approve the RFP and authorize the solicitation process.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. It's still not working. All those in favor, raise your hand, please. Motion passes 7-0. Mr. Clerk, please call the next item.
Council member agenda. Council member appointments and comments.
We'll start with appointments, and it still looks like it's not working, so we'll go down the list. District 1.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to appoint Stephanie Coley to the Wichita Land Bank Board of Trustees.
I just want to give a quick shout out. That is a CEA member that I asked last week, and she got her application in, which also reminds the community you can still apply for boards that have vacancies, and please go check them out at wichita.gov. District, no one else? Okay. I move to approve the appointment.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Mr. Clerk, actually, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7-0. We will now have councilmember comments. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I just wanted to state on record that I had been approved to attend the Community Leaders of America conference in Columbia, South Carolina this week. They were going to pay the trip and there was no cost to the city, but due to some conflicts in my schedule, I was not able to attend. I spoke with them and they were able to cancel the airline and the hotel and everything. So I had been approved, but just wanted to go on record that I'm not attending. And then just as a interesting highlight, I will be attending with our very own Don Henry tomorrow, the Kansas Municipal Utilities Conference, just for the section on direct potable reuse water in Kansas. So excited to be able to attend that. So thank you.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank the people that joined me last Saturday for a nice soggy park cleanup at Lincoln Park. We got it all ready for a nice Easter egg hunt. So there are a handful of community members that also joined me there, so I appreciate that. Also, this upcoming Saturday, we will be having Earth Day out at Clapp Park. So 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I think Councilmember Tuttle and I will be at a kickball event right before that. So I'll be going from there to the Earth Day event, but please come out. We'd like to have as many people there as possible. And part of the discussion will be direct potable reuse. So it's good to keep getting that message out there. Thank you.
I see no further comments. We can, well, actually, do you want us to do the special meeting and then workshop?
Mayor, it's up to you. You're welcome to go into workshop and have this after the workshop.
How about we'll go into this executive session so that then we can come back for the workshop. So I request an executive session. I move that the City Council recess into executive session for 10 minutes to receive information from property management staff pursuant to KSA 75-4319B2 for the preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property. The executive session is required to protect the city's right to the confidentiality of its negotiating position and the public interest. The executive session will begin at 11:10 a.m. and we will return at 11:20 a.m. Motion?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 7-0. We will begin at 11:10. Executive session, no binding action took place. We will move to adjourn this meeting to start the workshop meeting. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6-0. We are now adjourned, and we will now begin workshop. I know, it's really cold. City Manager Layton.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have just one workshop item today, and that's discussion of the budget, our current status, what we're learning as we go through expenditures and revenues for 25, how we're now rethinking a little bit on 26 and 27, bring you up to date with all of that. We have new estimates on expenditures that reflect the projects that we shared with you in workshop before that were our off-season projects, so that has helped the budget a little bit. And then also, we're going to present some initial thoughts on the CIP. The staff has put together an initial draft. However, we're out of balance with the CIP, and so we're going to be asking for some general direction as we bring that document into balance. We're going to bring some policy considerations forward on the CIP. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Goltry.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Goltry. I'm from the Finance Department, and I'm here to give you an update on the operating budget. If you're just joining us online for the first time today, just as a reminder, we also had budget workshops on January 28th and February 25th. You can find that information on YouTube. And if you're interested in the budget documents, for example, you can find them at wichita.gov by searching for budget. The outline for today's presentation is that I will provide an update on the operating budget, then Mark Manning, the Finance Director, will provide an update on the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, and then I'll finish us up with some next steps as we move forward. As far as the operating budget goes, right now we're in the middle of the story, so to speak. We kicked off the process in January, and the budget will be presented in July. At this point, we are continuing to update our models, review data we're constantly reviewing and updating the models. I will go into a little more detail on forecasting risks. Generally, those remain the same as the last time we provided a budget update. And then just generally, the trends overall are consistent with expectations. The biggest change in the model compared to last time is an adjustment to pension rates. As far as our forecasting risks go, just to be transparent with all of you, position vacancy rates are a forecast risk, both when it comes to overspending or underspending. We've been monitoring the level of position vacancies. Right now, there are slightly fewer position vacancies than there were at this point last year, which is really good news. But that was a factor when it came to our ending position in 2024. So we continue to monitor that so that we have the right amount of position vacancies modeled in the budget that don't prevent departments from filling positions, but reflect the reality of our position, our staffing as it is right now. There's a lot of uncertainty related to economic conditions and monetary policy, and then property tax growth rates is another forecasting risk that I'll go into more detail on. And then the final forecasting risk is labor rates for 2026 and 2027. At this point, there are 3 labor contracts that expire at the end of 2025. So that's a risk for 2026, a risk in the sense of forecasting risk, in the sense that we don't know exactly what those labor rates will be. And then for 2027, we don't have any contracts in place for that year. So that is a forecasting risk when it comes to estimating labor costs. These are some items that we've provided an update on last time, so just going to give you another update this time. Court revenues, last time we told you that they were underperforming compared to the 2025 adopted budget. That trend is continuing. I looked at the first quarter of this year and compared it to, the first quarter is generally a good the quarter when municipal court receives the most revenue in a given year. Based on the first quarter of this year, I expect that court revenues will be $1 million less than what I projected at the last workshop. Franchise fees, on the other hand, the first quarter was very strong, particularly in the area of natural gas as a result of the very cold weather that we experienced during that period. Interest earnings are something that we're constantly watching. Where we have risk with interest earnings is in reinvestment risk, and so that is when investments mature and they need to be reinvested, and there's some uncertainty in that area at this point. So next, I'll move into property tax growth components. Property tax, as a reminder, is the largest element, the largest component of revenue for the general fund and also for the debt service fund. The column for 2025, the first thing that's I guess the starting point to look at that is the 7.9%. That's the growth in 2025. That's based on the notice that we received from the county last June. And that was used to finalize the 2025 budget. There are a number of components of assessed valuation growth. One of them is new construction, which it seems that it's been strong in the community based on information that we received from places like MABCD. However, that was 1.3% of assessed valuation growth for this current year. Expiring exemptions, that's for things like IRBs, EDXs, and also TIFs that finish. Reappraisal, this is the average across the entire city. So this isn't one person's reappraisal. Well, it could be one person's reappraisal amount, but it's the average amount. And then other is for machinery and equipment exemptions. Usually that's negative, but it was a positive amount last year. So what we are forecasting for 2026, or what was presented to you last time, was 5.9% growth in 2026, and then slower growth the subsequent year. Whoops. Okay, so as a reminder, we will receive the estimated valuation notice from the county by June 15th. Right now, staff estimate 5.9% growth for next year, but that growth could be as high as 7%. Though there was a lot of discussion in the state legislature this year about local property tax, no action was taken. Therefore, the same statute from last year remains in effect for this year. And you do have an option of capturing less than the total AV growth. As a reminder, connected back to bullet point number 2, last year the same thing happened. We estimated growth that was less than the AV notice, and what happened is that the mill levy for this general fund was lowered, and the mill levy for the debt service fund was increased by 0.7 mils, and that helps improve the sustainability of that fund long term. So I have a number of forecasts for you. Just as a reminder, we will continue to review vacancy rates. We are looking at first quarter trends that they're consistent, but April and May will be other months that we review as those are closed in the accounting system. And pension costs are expected to be $0.6 million higher in 2026. It's not the result of investment performance, but it's the result of using more recent tables for items such as how long employees are expected to live. So that's good news. They're living longer. It's just a general, it's not just our employees, but just new tables for all pension systems. This is the baseline general fund forecast. So this is a very similar forecast to what was presented 2 months ago. The only change is the increased expenditures for the pension contribution, and a few other minor updates.
Real quick on the pensions.
Yes.
What are we funded at? Are we still over 90% of the pension funded?
I think that'll be presented, it'll be presented in a few months.
That's a very good question, Councilmember. You are about 2 weeks ahead of me because we will present the actuarial report, I think, on May 13th. We do have some preliminary information from our actuary. We are very close to 90%. We may be slightly below that. Having said that, we are still one of the best funded pension systems in the United States. But yes, our fund ratio may drop slightly below 90%.
Okay, appreciate that.
Right. Okay. Here's the next. Okay, so this forecast here, same as the February forecast with the pension rate increase rolled in, but now growth is AV growth is modeled at 7% instead of 5.9%. And I think something worth noting here is in 2026, even though there's a surplus at the bottom, that's actually structurally still a $2.1 million deficit because there'd be a transfer in from the stabilization reserve. This one, as far as property tax goes, it's relatively easy to forecast because property tax would be the same as it is in 2025. This is a R&R compliant model. The deficit at the end of the deficit in 2026, even with the stabilization transfer in, would be 8.3%. Just as a frame of reference, I think sometimes it's hard to imagine amounts comparatively. That would be about the same amount as the entire budget for municipal court. About half of the park department. Those are things that are around $8 million. So, and then it grows in the next year. And then this one here is a general foreign forecast for modified growth. So the concept with this one is that the city council would take action to exceed the revenue neutral rate, but rather than leaving the mill levy flat, the policy direction would be to only take the AV growth equivalent to new construction and inflation. So that would result in a deficit of $3.8 million, or structurally it'd be $6.8 million in 2026. One of the concerns that I have with the notices is that the amount of the percentage of growth from new construction just seems lower than it should be. We received the notice, but I'm sometimes, I don't know, I just have some misgivings about how they calculate new construction. So, and when the last property tax lid was in fact, we advocated for having renovation included in the information that was provided to us from the county clerk, because there are a lot of buildings that they're the same building, but there's a lot of work being done to them, and it really, especially downtown, for example, and so we wanted to make sure that we were able to capture that growth.
One other question here real quick.
Sure.
These projections, what is the outlook for the Fed interest rate when you're making these projections? I know it's such a tricky,
Yes.
and that's kind of why I'm asking is,
Yeah.
are we trying to meet the middle ground as to where we expect, or
Well,
project them to remain high or lower, or?
I got to tell you, council member, if I could answer that question, I would not be here today. I would be somewhere else probably. Our general modeling, which we started earlier in the year, was that rates would decline this year. We didn't know the number, but we anticipated rates to decline. And if you look at what the market was expecting earlier this year, I would have told you somewhere between 3 and 6 rates declines most likely throughout the year. You've probably seen the headlines recently where the Fed did not decrease interest rates. And now, based on what I'm reading, there might be 2 or 3 between now and the end of the year. So fundamentally, we are still expecting rates to decline, but I don't know if they'll decline quite as rapidly as what we thought. That'll probably be more of an impact for us next year because, like Elizabeth said, a lot of our portfolio is locked in. Our risk this year is only our reinvestment risk on things that mature between now and the end of the year. Probably have more of an impact on us next year. But again, that's the best answer I could give you.
So these projections are based more on a lower interest rate than
They are
what's currently happening anyway.
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question, Mark, I love the tie. How much additional revenue would raising the mill levy 1 bring in?
Roughly in the neighborhood of $5 million,
And then, so 2 would be like $10 million?
generally, roughly.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Anything else before I move along? All right.
I was the one that actually, can you go back to that slide?
This one?
Yes. the
Yeah,
last
you
one.
bet.
So even with a stabilization reserve, the actual deficit is 6.8 million, correct, for 2026?
Yeah, the structural deficit, yeah.
So also the structural deficit in 2027 would then be 13.8 million, is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes.
This was a question I asked last year, back in August, of what could we see in terms of a budget that took into account just new construction and inflation rates, and it was too far in the process. Now we're in April, so we can have this discussion. As you know, the legislature had considered this very option of rewarding municipalities that did not increase and took the full assessed valuation, but rather just new construction and inflation, a more prudent approach, as I'm hearing from community members, maybe not everyone else, but I'm hearing from community members that want us to lower or have some sort of relief when it comes to property taxes. So with this modified growth plan and really a $6.8 million deficit next year, what are things structurally, are we going to address that in the next couple of slides, that we could be doing to put ourselves out of this $6.8 million hole?
Mayor, we have direction from the council to give you 2 budgets, and basically we have a base budget. If you go back to slide 10, the base budget will be developed there. I'm sorry, 53, sorry.
Yeah.
The base budget will reflect these numbers, and then if we advance to the last slide you were on, we will bring back a series of changes in the budget in order to be able to meet these numbers, and the council then will need to make a decision about how to go forward. We're still meeting with the department directors. There will be another round of meetings or actions by the departments because we're not where we need to be in terms of giving you the list of what the options are to get to these numbers. So the departments will be working to prepare that information a little more. We're also trying to better align to the strategies that the council's approved as part of the goals that I endorsed early in the year. So we'll have that information for you as well. Trying to get it all tied up in a timing that gives you ample opportunity to have just those discussions.
Sorry, I'm not used to using.
But now we know what we're shooting at.
Not used to using the mic in workshops, so apologize about that. Regarding, or follow-up to Councilman Johnson's question regarding a raise of the mill levy of 1 mil would be 5 million. If subsequently, or let's say a sales tax portion, what would be a 1% sales tax in terms of increased revenue for the city?
Yeah, that's pretty speculative because our sales tax is actually a part of the countywide sales tax, so we don't know exactly what it would be. But right now, our half of the sales tax that goes into the general fund is around 30. Yeah, so what do you think? I mean, it's like.
Is your question, Councilmember, how much a 1 cent city-only sales tax would generate?
Correct, yeah.
That's a challenging question too, because we don't have a tax base upon which to estimate it. But we can get pretty close. We can take what the county generates. We can guesstimate how much would be generated in the city of Wichita. Last time I did that, it's probably been a year or so ago. But if I remember, the number was north of 100 million.
100 million.
Yeah, each tenth is roughly 10 million or somewhere in that ballpark.
For a 1% or a 1 cent?
Same difference, 1 cent or 1%, yeah. Would be somewhere, I think it was 108 million last time I calculated it.
Okay, thank you.
So just to add to the conversation, so I have heard differently. Bob is actually a witness at my breakfast. I had multiple people say we should raise the mill levy. That was without prompting from me or even talking to them about it. So looking at raising the mill, one, giving us $5 million helps us out quite a bit. Raising it, two, helps us out a lot more. And as we talk about the state wanting to reward municipalities for basically doing what they want, the reality is it's all of our tax dollars anyway. So they were going to take tax dollars that we were paying that they received and try to award municipalities for doing what they wanted, and it's our money anyway. So really, it's just kind of a cat and mouse game that the legislature was playing. I really think that given the situation we were in, we need to continue to strongly consider raising the mill levy. I know it's unpopular, but again, it puts the city in a difficult position, even going with the newly proposed way in the second budget. Anything outside of the base budget is going to make the city struggle for years to come. And at some point, there's going to be a stronger demand to raise a mill levy, and instead of raising it 1 or 2 to catch up, it's going to be a lot more than that. So I hope that is strongly considered, even the numbers that we talked about today, and I asked a question so it could be in the public record. Raising the mill 1, you see the revised deficit would be $5 million. We wouldn't have that deficit. Raising the mill 2 would be $10 million, and you see the revised deficit for 2027, that would then be 0.8 instead of 10.8. So again, if people want to continue the service level that we continue to provide now, as we see that labor wages are going to go up, and most of our budget is staff, as we talk about not taking in enough money, that leads to our people not getting the pay that they deserve, or us not having those people. And that's going to be a struggle for future councils. So I hope we take it seriously now. It might be a painful decision, but it's going to be more painful in the future, rather than just looking at doing what we can to try to cut our way out of this.
Councilman Johnson's points, I had a breakfast and almost every single person universally said, do not raise my property taxes. So I think it shows maybe distinctions of different communities and different districts as well. And so when we're talking about revenue increase, I think we should have a more holistic conversation. Again, raising mill levy 1 brings $5 million. Even having a sales tax conversation, I think, should be on the table about how we fund government. An example that I'll use is a 90-year-old woman who lives in South Wichita isn't using our park system. She isn't benefiting from cultural arts and services as much. What she is doing is she's using our road system, police, fire when needed. And so not putting the burden on property tax owners when they already own the property and taxing them out of their homes. How can we still seek revenue, but make sure it's in a more equitable way? So I think it's a conversation that we should continue as well in future discussions regarding, especially when it comes to upcoming deficits.
I will ask city manager to also send out, I requested the property taxes levied per district for 2024, and thankfully Mark Manning was able to do that. And so this will be sent out to all council members, but I do want to put it on the public record so that people are aware of where property taxes are coming from. A total of $164 million in property taxes were levied. The highest number of property taxes levied was in district number 2. That was 28% at $45.2 million, followed by district number 5 at 19%, $30.8 million, followed by district number 4 at 16%, $26.9 million, followed by district number 6 at 15% at $24.4 million. And then after that, it is district number 1 at 14% of $23.2 million. And then the last is district number 3 at 8%, $13.3 million. And so I only bring this up because we're having a discussion about property taxes. And again, I have heard from individuals that want property taxes to be lowered. I have not heard specifically emails to me or in-person interactions that they want mill levies to keep increasing. but I would welcome any discussion regarding property taxes. I would like to get more information, though, on the sales tax portion that Councilmember Glasscock asked about, 1% or a 1 cent sales tax and what that would levy.
I would be in favor of that too. My concern is all these bedroom communities are using our services, but not paying for any of it. They're using our roads. A lot of times they're using our libraries, our parks, and they're not paying for any of it. So if we did have a sales tax, they would be paying for some of it. So I would look for property tax relief and substitute with the sales tax.
Well, I'll go ahead and chime in on this conversation a bit. It's been a mixed bag in my district, but surprisingly, the people that have urged me the most to increase the mill levy have been elderly people. I just recently did another fireside chat. I do it every 3 months, the Linwood Rec Center, and the past 2 conversations this has come up, and almost universally the people there talked about wanting to leave something for their grandkids, make sure that they have a community that is strong and that can respond to the needs of the community and continue to invest in our community. I am open to the sales tax. I would want to make sure first that the public comes along and tells us that they want it, and I think that would have to go out for a vote. I'd also want to make sure that necessities, hygiene products and whatnot are part of that being excluded, because the last thing we want to do is put a bigger burden on some of the people who are struggling right now, and sales tax does do that. It is a regressive tax. So what we can do to best make sure that the necessities that people rely on to actually live are excluded from any possible sales tax talk going forward. And again, a lot of dialogue with the community and say something akin to the MAPS plan, I think, to where the community has a say in how we spend it. This might be a bit of a relief for the CIP. So I okay with continuing on that conversation as well. But I did also want to just put my 2 cents in on the what I've heard from my constituents in regards to property taxes.
Ditto to Councilmember Hoheisel. I'm supportive of sales tax conversation coming along with the community. I just think it needs to only be capital investment and not any type of city operations. Sales tax can be volatile at times, and just looking at current events right now, we don't know what type of global trade wars will happen, and if people start spending less because of higher costs, then that's less reliability on that. Whereas if it was capital, we'd just be able to keep some money into the reserve until the next year until something could be built. So it eases us a little bit budget-wise, but I would be in favor of capital investment from sales tax, but nothing else.
To that question, this would be a question for staff too. When would we have to let you know what percent of the taxation of the mill goes to CIP versus general operating budget? I know we had this discussion briefly last year, and it was like a timetable of a week. So
Yeah, no, I think that we would start by updating the model for what we would estimate 1 cent of sales tax would generate, right? That would be the starting place based on how much revenue we generated last year and what we expect this year, next year, and so forth. And then from there, you can, a tenth, 2 tenths, and so forth. And then I guess you would look at, if you were looking at it from a standpoint of substituting, like substituting mills and, substituting it for debt service fund mills or general fund mills, you would go from there.
Okay, and that has to be done by the time that we seek revenue neutral or to exceed revenue neutral from the
Yeah, I think,
state.
yeah, I'm not real familiar with the election deadlines. And I think are you talking about having an election for sales tax?
Not the election deadline. So last year when we were having conversations of whether or not to exceed revenue neutral or not, the percent of the mill towards the operating budget versus CIP had to be set by a certain date.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, the split between, there's all the property tax and the split. I think that's set with the cert forms. Yeah, the publication of notice, that would be, would be the same day that you would exceed the revenue neutral rate, but then there's a second action on the maximum taxes to be levied the maximum budget, and that's the day where the split between the general fund and the debt service fund is locked in.
July 15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that. It was
Oh, no,
answering
you're
a
good.
different question.
I was trying to figure out how to.
Yeah,
ask that, so-
no, but yes, I'm so sorry. I caught up with you. Thank you for your patience.
And I
Yes.
guess my last thing would be just to differentiate. I support, again, sales tax, looking at capital investments. My suggestion on the mill levy, when we look at cost, is probably a lot more affordable. So 1% on pretty much everything you're buying except for necessities if we did that, versus 1 mil is equal to, and these are a little older numbers, $11 for every $100,000 valuation of your property. So if you have a property worth $100,000, 1 mil would raise your property tax $11. That's just $11 more that you're paying a year versus 1% on everything else. So when we talk about that and what it means for the city, that's also why you see those revenue differences, $5 million and $10 million versus $75, $100 million. So this funding the government and the things that we are doing, again, not huge expansions of services and programs, but maintaining service levels, is pretty affordable in that sense. If you go out, grab a pizza, you know how expensive Starbucks is. If you get 1 or 2 coffees there, that's pretty much the cost per year of raising a meal 1 or 2. And again, that's about $11 for every $100,000 valuation of your property. Those numbers may be a little different going forward, by little, probably in the terms of cents, not dollars. But I just want people to really think about that. It's not a large investment in that sense. Yes, it is property tax, and that's a conversation that is all over the place right now. But in real numbers, those are real numbers for you.
You all ready to move forward? Just making sure. Okay. So in January, the community survey results were shared with everybody. And then in February, there was a workshop about really building out our mission statement with goals and defining the pillars and then having goals and also strategies. 46 strategies have been aligned to the 23 goals. And right now there's a lot, I have a couple examples of the strategies that in the alignment that follows. Incorporating these elements into the budget has been the central focus of budget discussions. So just like we have these budget workshops, the city council has workshops, staff and departments and the budget office, the finance department, city manager, et cetera, have discussions about the budgets as well. And as a reminder, the budget is a financial planning document, but it's also a strategic planning document. So some of these strategies stretch across into other parts of the community, other funding sources. A lot of these strategies will require a lot of collaboration across the community. I've got 3 examples of these pillars, goals, and strategies to share with you. The first one is in the Keeping Wichita Safe goal, and this is related to behavioral health and substance abuse. This strategy, it's my understanding that there are ongoing efforts with the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition regarding this very issue. The city of Wichita has received funds from the opioid settlement and is working with Sedgwick County on a plan for that. So that's an example of how these strategies reach across just our budget document across the community.
And the opioid settlement funds are not included in our budget, correct?
Actually, there is an opioid settlement fund. It's one of our 35 funds that we appropriate every year. And so the city of Wichita revenue and then the expenditures that go out of that fund are in our budget.
So it is included, because that funding has to be allocated specifically for, I think, new treatment, as opposed to backfilling anything we're currently funding.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with all the specifics, but at this point, I think those funds have been used for planning efforts and then for some purchases in the police department for.
It shows that it's allocated just so you have the authority to spend it, even though you haven't approved the actual annual financing or expenditure plan.
So, the next pillar, there are a total of 5 pillars, and in the Grow Our Economy pillar, there's a strategy related to affordable housing. And we asked a question about affordable housing in the community survey this for the first time in 2024. And the results of the survey match the feedback that people are getting from the community, and that it's a high priority, but it's considered a lower quality service at this point in time. And this is just another example of these strategies taking more than one superstar or one highly committed person, but that there's going to take a lot of collaboration and effort across this community, and that we are a partner in this, and we do have a special role as with our housing department and some other things, but that it's going to be a big effort. And the last one to highlight today is also something that it's related to something that was asked for the first time in the community survey, which is homelessness services. It was in the same area as affordable housing in that magenta quadrant. And again, there's been work that's been ongoing. This isn't the first time the city of Wichita has been partnering with the community on this issue. But this strategy really puts a point on some of the efforts that are ongoing. So just wanted to familiarize you with that and to provide some context in ongoing discussions. And so how that really, before I move on, how that really connects with the budget is that many of these services are things that we've been engaged in in the past, but there's a different challenge ahead of us now than there used to be. So the budget really is, there's the revenue forecasting part, which we just went through, but also a matter of reallocation and determining what goals or outcomes that we're driving toward. So these strategies really provide some focus as we're considering the budget this year. So additionally, in February, I believe you were presented some updates on research projects that were a result of adopting the budget last August. And those are being formalized in a department budget, so we're lining those out. And then also we're going to be having cost recovery reviews across departments. So we've already started on some of those. I think that dog licensing changes have already been approved by the city council. There have been a variety of other efforts that are various places in the process in other departments. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about the capital improvement program, unless you have questions about this section, I'm sorry, or feedback.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Mark Manning, Department of Finance. I recognize that I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. Having said that, we haven't talked about the CIP much this year, so I will go into a little bit of detail on some of the concepts, but I'll keep it conceptual and high level. So takeaway on this slide, the numbers are still moving around, but the CIP is about a $3 billion 10-year plan and has a variety of funding sources. Today, I'm going to focus most of my energy on the slice I have kind of pulled out there, and that's the GO at large slice. I'm going to focus on that because that is the slice that is funded with property taxes, which kind of ties into some of the discussion we had a little bit earlier today. So this shows you where we spend our money, and again, the slices I have pulled out are the slices that are generally funded from general obligation at large or debt service fund, property tax funded bonds. And that is things like heavy equipment, which is dump trucks and bulldozers and things that Public Works uses in their maintenance activities. It's a lot of park and rec expenditures. It's a lot of public facility expenditures, maintaining our buildings. But by far, the largest slice of GO at large funding is for public safety, which is that slice down at the bottom. So again, keep in mind that I'm going to focus on debt service fund, specifically property tax funded debt service fund. And that means I'm going to focus on generally public safety, building maintenance, heavy equipment, park, things like that. Again, the rest of the CIP is very important, but a lot of it's utility finance and a lot of the issues are a little bit different. One thing that is the same in the entire CIP is that it is based on the community investments plan. The community investment plan priorities are very clear. They have 3 spending priorities. Priority number 1 is to maintain our assets, and that's incorporated in the discussion that staff has had at this point. priority number 2 and 3 is to enhance and expand our assets. So again, we interpret that to focus on maintenance in the CIP, and you'll see that in just a minute. We're also, just like the operating budget, we're aligned to the city council's goals and pillars, and you'll see an example of that here in just a second. So that is what guides the staff committee in our development of our capital improvement program recommendation. It's also a very data-driven process. We involve engineers, and if you know engineers, they're very data-driven. So we use a lot of things like we're going to use asset condition data, replacement schedules. We use a lot of engineering data on our roads and bridges for empirical methodologies on what to replace. And finally, our CIP is structured to be financially viable. That's our, yes, ma'am.
Before you move on, can you tell us, you just mentioned staff-driven. So can you talk about the process? Does each department propose to the city manager? How does that process go about? Can you tell me who presents the CIP?
That's a perfect lead into my next slide, Mayor. Thank you. The way the CIP is developed is we form a committee of staff, which we call the CIP committee. And that is generally a committee of departments that are involved heavily in the CIP. Public Works, engineering staff, park, airport, transit, those kind of departments. And then we also include other departments that also have a role, which is our public safety departments, library, and things like that. So it's very inclusive. Basically, we involve anyone that has a stake in the capital improvement program, which is most of our departments. The committee's job is basically to serve as a filter. So we review all the requests from departments. We just kind of review them to talk about strategic alignment again. We question whether it's a maintenance or enhancement or expand. We look at the strategic alignment to the city council goals and pillars, and then we incorporate that into a model. Then finance staff gets involved, and we develop the financial models, particularly for the debt service fund, local sales tax fund, and others. And then we work with our partners in Public Works on the water and sewer utility funds. So basically, we review projects, we review for strategic alignment, we create a model, we try to ensure it's financially viable, and then we present that model. We are not quite at the last step right now. Again, we have created a model. We're in the trying to make it financially viable step right now, which the manager mentioned earlier, and that's my last bullet. In ballpark terms, we're over-allocated somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million in GEO projects, and primarily that's in the first few years of projects. Projects tend to accelerate towards the earlier years. That's bad from a financing standpoint, but it's understandable because everybody wants to get their projects done sooner. But that's our challenge, as the manager alluded to, and that'll be the next step of the committee.
Who are the filters again for the CIP committee? Are there 3 people? Is it the entire committee? Is all the departments?
It's probably 10 to 15, depending on who is able to come to particular meetings. Again, it'll be Director Airport, Director Public Works, the city engineer, park director, finance director, planning director. I'm sure I'm missing others. And then again, we invite the police chief and the fire chief. The library director typically shows up. So it is most department directors.
Just real quick, Mark, 2 questions. One is, can you talk a little bit how we pay the CIP? If I'm not mistaken, there's a number of projects we pay half down and then the other half over the 5 of the 10, the later years, 5 of the 10, because it's a 10-year project.
You're a slide or 2 ahead of me, council member.
Okay.
But yes, fundamentally, you are correct. We generally like to pay about 50% of our costs in cash, and we like to debt finance about 50%. And you're also correct in that the timing of projects, the way projects are timed, we obviously don't pay the entire project cost on the day it's initiated. It is spread out over time. And that's what gives us a little bit of flexibility.
And then second question, I'm sure you got another slide for this one as well. The interest rates being high work for us on the general obligation, but as far as CIP, it's the reverse. The lower the interest rates, actually, the more bang for the buck we will get for the CIP if they come down.
That is completely correct. It's a tailwind for the general fund, but it's a headwind for the debt service fund. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So again, our challenge right now is we're in the creating a CIP that is financially viable. And so we use policy direction on that. We had a great discussion on that earlier, but the amount of mills in the debt service fund and the portion of the assessed valuation growth we choose to capture will have a direct bearing on the condition of the debt service fund in addition to the general fund. So Councilmember Glasscock, I think, alluded to that, but that would be something that would have a direct impact positively or negatively, depending on the policy direction on the debt service fund, therefore on the capacity of us to finance GEO projects. The other primary thing that influences the CIP is the water and sewer rates, which are based, of course, on the COSA that Public Works develops and presents to you each year, and we generally try to align the CIP to that modeling as well. There's a variety of other revenue streams, but those are the two primary ones that we look at. Again, why do we want to align the CIP financially? Well, it aligns to the pillars and goals. We want to be a well-run city. So what we want to do in context of debt service fund, we look at basically three fundamental things. We want our debt level to be consistent with our guidelines, and that's what I was talking to Councilmember Hochheisel about. We generally want to spend about 50% for cash and about 50% for debt. We also obviously want the debt service fund to be balanced each year. There's a little bit more flexibility in the general fund, but fundamentally we want it to be balanced on an annual basis. And finally, probably most importantly, we want to maintain our fund balances in the debt service fund. As you can imagine, our rating agencies, in addition to looking at our liquidity in the general fund, are also very attuned to our debt service fund. And they get very nervous when our fund balances in the debt service fund drop, unless it's for a specific reason, which occasionally it is. But so this is a busy chart.
Can I go back, sorry,
Yes, ma'am.
to that slide?
Yep.
In our handouts, it says consistent at 7.5 mils, but the slide is 7.0.
Yes, thank you. I forgot to mention that. I had a typo in your written material, so I corrected it in the PowerPoint. 7 mils is what our policy. Now, we actually, as Elizabeth mentioned, it was increased last year to actually about 7.7, but consistently the policy direction has been 7 mils in the general fund. But again, that is a policy determination you will make, and as Elizabeth said, that's something we need to know by July 15th when we do our publication and notice.
And again, can you explain the reason why it increased to 7.7 was the 0.7 was the vacancies rate?
The 0.7 was, since the policy direction last year was to capture all the assessed valuation growth, that provided the flexibility to direct that growth towards one-time capital improvement needs, and the way to accomplish that was to shift that mill levy into the debt service fund so that we could do that.
We call that the Glasscock plan. That's what.
So very busy chart, but just let me give you a couple takeaways. This is my effort to try to simplify a 10-year projection for the debt service fund. Hopefully I accomplish that, perhaps not. The first takeaway is the yellow line on the top is our revenues. We want the bars to be at or below the revenues. That means we're balanced. If the little red bar there is above the yellow line, that means we're imbalanced. And you can see that is the case for a lot of the years here. That's our challenge. We need to push those red bars down a little bit. So how do we push those red bars down? We shrink the, I'm going to call it the blue bar. It's either blue or purple, I'm told, but whichever color that is new debt. That's debt that we need to issue to finance the CIP. That's the 50% of projects that we'll issue debt for. We need to shrink that bar basically in order to pull the entire bar below the yellow line. So how do we shrink that? We either push projects out or we push them forward. That's fundamentally, ultra simplistically, the challenge that we have on the debt service fund. Finally, I put our ending balance on this slide here. That's the light blue line down at the bottom. You can see it would erode from somewhere a little bit north of 20 million now to a little south of 10 million. That would probably not be a very good look for people that scrutinize our debt service fund. So we want to kind of try to avoid that if possible. So again, what will we do? What will we do to try to come up with a financially viable plan? Well, we have a couple of technical things we can do, and when I mean we, I mean the committee. We'll look at areas in which funds have previously been appropriated but perhaps not spent. And sometimes that happens to a variety of factors. Sometimes it's timing issues. But some projects we appropriate year after year after year, and sometimes we're a little slower spending money that has already been appropriated. So we'll look in areas like that and see if we can maybe skip a year or two based on amounts that have previously been appropriated but not necessarily spent. Another thing we'll look at is project scheduling. I mentioned earlier a lot of departments maybe get a little aggressive in how they want their projects scheduled, and for good reason. but sometimes we look at that and see whether it's actually practical or not. And so we may make some adjustments in timing schedules, which is to say move projects out a little bit, maybe to a more realistic timetable. And then the last thing we'll do is, again, we'll go back to our core strategic guidelines, which is maintenance is priority number one. We'll re-scrutinize all our projects and ensure that we have funded maintenance first, because there are some enhancement and expansion projects included in the current draft. So that's our methodology. I wanted to show you this slide. This shows you the emphasis on maintenance now. I show you the geo column is probably the most important. Right now we're at 60%, which is actually pretty high. Usually we're in the mid-50s. So this CIP would allocate 60% of our property tax revenue to maintenance projects. And you can see the expand projects is relatively small at 11%. Now the total CIP is 41% maintenance. Let me give you a couple caveats why that's shown that way. Freeways are not considered a maintenance project. Freeways are $300 million for K96. We also have special assessments, which again is not considered a maintenance project. That's not geo, but that's another $300 million. So there's a couple humongous chunks that skew the percentage of the total CIP. But again, I would focus primarily on the geo and the LST, and we're at 60% local sales tax. Sorry, I shouldn't use acronyms. We are at 60% right now of geo spending would be for maintenance, and about half of the local sales tax would be for maintenance activities. But again, we'll look at that. We'll focus on the enhance and expand projects, and we'll determine if there's any better strategic alignment to focus more on maintenance than we already have. I just want to give you a few brief examples of some projects that are maintenance. I mentioned a few earlier. Heavy equipment, we're going to spend maybe $40 million on heavy equipment. That's dump trucks, bulldozers, things like that allow Public Works to perform their role in the operating budget to maintain our assets. We spend a lot of money on city buildings, again, for maintenance activities. We spend a lot of money on public safety facilities and equipment for maintenance activities. And then Park and Rec, I identified a few there that we have. I probably forgot to put one of the more important ones that we've included in our draft, and that's maintenance for our parking system. We've got about $18 million in for maintenance on our parking system.
Mark, I have a quick question. Sorry.
ma'am.
On the last slide, for the city buildings, oh no, sorry, I think you went one too far.
Yep.
When you're talking about maintenance, are you talking about like scheduled type maintenance or like deferred maintenance that is?
I'm talking about maintenance activities that Public Works has identified through their decision support tool, which is, I would tell you mostly it's scheduled maintenance, and I think they try to attack deferred maintenance to the extent possible. But these are the projects that you typically, I think you approved them a month or two ago. We have general building maintenance projects, and then Public Works will develop a schedule of what they think the priorities are, and then they'll align their expenditures to those priorities. And again, that's going to be guided by their decision support tool. So.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Can we stay on that slide for
Yes, ma'am.
another second? In regards to heavy equipment, that's obviously a very large number. Have we thought about other ways? I know that I attended the Sedgwick County Association of Cities, and the smaller communities in Sedgwick County talked to the county about sharing some of the heavy equipment costs. Have we ever thought about even that?
You're getting more into the operational realm, which I may not be qualified to discuss, but I will tell you this. My understanding is that most of this equipment is pretty heavily utilized by our current Public Works staff, so I don't know if they have any excess capacity that would be available to share, but I'm sure Public Works staff could provide you more detail or more information about that.
I would be curious, not necessarily with the smaller communities, but even with the county, are there any opportunities there of co-utilizing heavy equipment? Maybe they might have equipment that they just bought that we could utilize, vice versa. I'm just trying to think of other ways, since 38 million is a lot of dollars here, how we can better utilize our friends across the street.
I think a challenge you might also run into is we're basically both in the same business at the same time. I mean, we're not busy in the winter and they're busier in the summer, which would allow more equipment sharing. We basically do the same thing at the same time. So again, I'm not qualified to provide you an answer in any more detail than that. Certainly something we can look into.
Maybe city manager, if you could take note on that. Thank you.
Let me give you a few examples of enhancement and expansion projects. Public safety is where the bulk of those are, and that, of course, is our fire station building plan and our police station building plan for the most part. So a lot of enhancement and expansion projects in the public safety area. We've got a few in streets and parks and public facilities, but again, the vast majority of those you're going to find in the public safety space. So what's our next steps? And then I'll wrap up here. Again, we will review our debt service fund revenues based on any policy direction. Some of the stuff we mentioned earlier, because that'll have a direct bearing on our capacity. We'll also look at a variety of technical things to make sure we have the right amounts and the right time for our projects. And then finally, most importantly, probably we will look at strategic alignment issues, maintenance versus enhancement and expansion, things of that nature and strategic alignment. So the committee will meet, we'll do that, we'll provide a draft to the city manager, and ultimately I think that draft will be provided to you once we come up with one that's financially viable. So I'll take a pause point there before Elizabeth finishes up. She just has a couple more slides to go over, and if there's any more questions about the CIP, I'd be happy to try to respond to them. Okay.
If we could just pause for a second. I want to make sure that the council is comfortable with the way we've prioritized CIP, and that as we look at trying to balance the 25 million, that we'll primarily be looking at enhancement and expansion projects, protecting the maintenance as much as possible. If you're in general agreement with that, then that's where we'll focus the committee's attention next.
I am in favor of maintaining more than the other two E's. And I do like the 60% right now at maintenance. I know Mark mentioned usually it's in the mid-50s, so it's a bit high, but I am hearing again, maintaining what we have is something that we should prioritize. Slide number 20.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, I'd just like to, maybe can we stay up to date, be kept up to date as far as what projects are being looked at, being moved further down the line? That way it's not going to take anybody by surprise.
Yes, if we try to do that after we get to a balanced document, I think we normally do a sheet of what was pushed out, either out of the CIP or into later years, so that you have that information.
Okay.
Because in most cases, we're talking about projects that were already in the document, and it's just a matter of switching them.
Right.
Delaying
Okay.
them.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I just hope that publicly the community pays attention to that conversation as well. Maintaining means maintaining what we have and where it is. And if you were hoping to see something expanded or new in your area and it gets kicked down the path so that we can maintain, that means you don't see what you were hoping to see. So also, if you don't like that, please be vocal and let us know your thoughts about that as well. Because again, a lot of the neighborhoods that we have seen where they want something expanded, enhanced, new, will then be forced to only have to maintain what they have, if they have anything. So again, it is a balance. Maintaining is important, but also people deserve to have other investments in their neighborhoods as well.
Right. So I will wrap this up. So next steps on the CIP, we've already talked, Mark already mentioned a lot of this. Updating the projects and the timing, the scale, and things like that. So you'll probably be seeing more of that as we move through the process. Then on the operating budget side, we'll continue monitoring revenue data for April and May. And then this inventory of strategy alignment across departments, that's ongoing. It's very interesting, and it's definitely guiding the process this year. And then continuing resident engagement. So we have, we'll be visiting all the DAB meetings in May, so hopefully we'll get to experience the feedback that you're getting firsthand. It sounds like there's some interesting conversations going on in the community, and it's very edifying to hear that so many people are engaged in the budget process, just because it is very hard work for all of us. And then we're continuing to connect back to the community survey results, and then we'll launch the budget simulator in May. So just as far as what it looks like as a calendar, we'll be attending all the DAB meetings in May, and then there'll be a workshop on May 27th. And then in mid-June, of course, is when the AV notice is received, and that workshop in late June, it'll be a tight turn, but we don't usually have a workshop in June, but that'll be an opportunity to incorporate the assessed valuation notice into budgeting concepts rather than having a longer gap like we've had in the past between the AV notice and the budget being printed. And then the budget will be presented on July 15th this year, and that's when the R&R notice would be considered and also the maximum taxes to be levied, as we talked about before. August 7th is the date for the evening meeting. I think that's on a Thursday. And then we'll have some time to consider concepts and research between then and the August 19th, that third public hearing. And then the adoption this year is relatively late on August 26th because of the calendar that's set by state statute. So that is what we have for you today. Thanks for all of your engagement. Like I said, this is hard work, but it's really great to get the feedback and know how invested and involved everyone is in the community.
I want to add my thanks to the work that you did early this year. The establishment of the goals and then our ability to put strategies together has really helped shape this budget process and it's brought a lot more focus to the discussions. So thank you.
I appreciate the conversation, and one more time, we should raise the mill levy.
Also, if there are any substantial changes along the way as far as our projections, depending on what happens nationally, globally, please keep us updated as far as, I know it's real dynamic right now and it's really tough to kind of try and predict what's going on, but.
Yeah, I would expect that would be the kind of content that would be shared at the workshop in May. I wouldn't expect anything to be very different between now and going out to the DAB meetings. I would expect the content that we share today to be very similar to what we would have at the DAB. So,
your lips to God's ears.
So,
I would challenge for the presentations in May at all the DAB meetings, if we can have a breakdown of all the 16 departments and how much each receives in terms of a budget. I think we need to be guided by what currently is in the adopted budget. And I know that a lot of folks don't know that a lot of these services are not fully funded by property taxes. And I think that would be helpful in individuals understanding what each department is allocated in terms of a budget. So I created the pamphlet that shows how local government works. I would maybe ask if there could be maybe a slide or a couple of slides or a handout to give to individuals that shows the 16 departments and what each gets in terms of a budget.
yeah, we do have a document that we could, I guess, turn into a handout. I think the budget facts, and so it shows the budget for each department and then how much of it is funded by property tax. So that
That'd be
sounds
great.
like what
Yes.
you're talking about.
And if you could also maybe include the number of staff members per each of those
Okay.
departments.
Consider it.
I think it would be a great way to have that discussion. Just like I asked city manager to send out the property taxes levied by each district, I think that's also important information so that individuals can have a well-informed idea of not just property taxes, but how other sources of funding help with the local budget.
Yeah, and then we'll also be launching the budget simulator, which is almost universally unpopular because it forces people to make tough decisions to balance the budget. And usually, people like it as a tool, but it's difficult, if that makes sense. So this is difficult work.
So one suggestion that came from our breakfast, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot
you
about
bet.
it, was that on the budget simulator, and maybe even at the DAB, could we have like an asterisk that says raising the mill 1 would be this amount and raising it 2 would be this? It doesn't play with the simulator, but just showing an asterisk that shows what it would look like.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that you can choose to set up the simulator. And one of them, which we don't have that option set up, it would allow people to fill in the deficit with increasing property tax, but we don't have that option this year. Does that make sense? Like, you can't do both. You can, it's not us, right? There's limits to what it can do. It's just a software program.
When we
But
facilitate the discussion, whoever's doing it on staff can address that issue. And I think it's a legitimate question, because it comes out so often that that exercise results in people not wanting to cut service, and then they say, you didn't give me an option to raise revenue, so then we can talk about that as an alternative. But what we've tried to do is create the environment that we currently have for the budget process, and that's limited resources going into funding existing services.
I think that would be great. And just even from our breakfast, when every time you got to the next item, someone was like, well, we should sweep our streets more. We should do this, and we need more investment in the neighborhood. And that wasn't an option, and then that's when people started saying to raise the mill levy. But I just think, even if it was just in bold for the simulator, and then staff talking about it at the DABs, but I'm not asking for like a button or anything, just some words that says.
Yeah. Right. And we also, there's a landing page for the simulator, and that still needs to be updated or built again for this year. So that's the place to put it. And then there's also a place at the end where people can provide their feedback. And it's kind of fascinating, because it seems like for every person who says one thing, there's another person who says the opposite thing, which is, it feels like the same conversation that's happening in the community, but online. It's just really, it's very consistent, this conversation.
I think the hardest thing is to remind everybody that we've set the simulator up to reflect the survey results. And now we have 2 years where we've done the quadrants, and so there are certain buttons you can't move for additional expense because they were in low importance in the survey. And so I know every service seems to have an advocate, but at the same time you're really not in step with where the majority of the community is. And so but again, that's understanding the trade-offs in the budget.
Yeah. The other feedback I've heard is people will say, I want to just get rid of all of this department, of a particular department. And I just don't think that modeling the simulator to be built that way. I think I've heard of communities that have allowed people to do that, and then the city council has no interest in doing that. And so it makes sense. I feel like when we talk about the budget, or you talk about the budget, we're trying to make things better and balanced. We've not been interested in there's not been an interest expressed in eliminating an entire department. So that's another kind of feedback I've gotten.
We'll just add a couple of thoughts. I appreciate Councilmember Johnson bringing up this discussion. And I think a couple of months ago, we actually had that discussion about who on this council out of 7 is interested in raising the mill levy. And if I remember correctly, I don't think there was the majority, but maybe I'm wrong this time around and we could do it again. But I do believe that there are 7 members on this committee, this council, and if a majority wants us to lower taxes or raise taxes, increase mill levy, lower mill levy, we can have that discussion. Do we want to have that discussion?
So I think we will naturally have that discussion anyway, sometime in July, when it's time to vote on setting the mill levy, raising the mill levy, or lowering the mill levy. Then there's also the votes here that we'll see. So council will have that discussion today. People raising hands, that's not the actual vote. So when it comes time to put the numbers to the paper and get all that submitted and look at our realistic budget situation and the tough decisions we'll have in the future, then this body will have to vote. And this body will be voting not only on this year, but what type of position the council will be in years prior. I know before I was elected, the council made a lot of tough decisions to make sure that the council that took over in 2018 didn't have as bad of a situation as it could have been, and this council will be doing the same. So I think that vote will naturally happen, and this discussion will continue in the community.
I think we're good.
Thank you.
We will now adjourn the workshop. Have a great week.